Okay, it is now 7:01, I believe, so we're going to open the Finance Committee meeting. We are being taped for broadcast in the future on the cable systems and the town website. So first up, we have the Police Department. Do you want to come up, Chief? First, let me say congratulations. I haven't seen you since your
Thank you.
promotion. Congratulations.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Let's just go around the table real quick to make sure everybody knows. We'll start with, I'm Ryan Hogan.
Carol Koglinski.
Cindy Shepherd.
Jean Mother.
Eric Chamberlain.
And your name is? You've got to pronounce it as often as you can.
Nick Miglianico.
I'm sorry. Pam Holmes.
Mike Hudak.
This group could be in trouble. That was one of the easier parts of the meeting tonight. We only got a part C. All right, welcome, Chief.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure how you want to do that. Do you want to walk, I know you provide us a memo. Do you want to go kind
Yeah,
of
well,
walk through that first?
what I was
or-
thinking, I'll just give you a quick, I know you got a busy agenda tonight, but I'll give you a quick overview of the police department, and then I'll jump right into the budget.
Okay, sounds great.
So right now, tonight, as we speak, the police department has 19 full-time officers and 10 part-time. Of those 10 part-time, 8 of them are part-time dispatchers, and 5 out of the 10 are also part-time officers. So we use them in dual roles, the part-time people. So we have myself, we have a lieutenant, we have 3 patrol sergeants, 1 detective sergeant, 9 patrolmen, and 4 full-time dispatchers. One of those patrolmen is assigned to the school full-time during the school year as a full-time resource officer. So he works Monday through Friday, and he's strictly at the schools during the school year. We get him back during the summer. So essentially, to police the town, we have 14 full-time officers plus myself. So when we look at staffing levels, we always look to, in law enforcement, we look at the FBI gives us some statistics every year regarding the officer to population ratio. So in the Northeast, they say you should have about 2.7 officers for every 1,000 people that you have in town. If you break it down a little bit more, out here in Central Mass, it's about 1.9 officers per 1,000. So with our population at around 8,540, we should be at 16 full-time officers is what they recommend, plus the chief. So essentially, if we go by those statistics and those numbers, which we're down about 2 officers per our population. But you gotta keep in mind too that that's our residential population. So in the summertime, you're looking at with Wallem Lake and even the water slides, you know, that can put your population well over 10,000 on a good day.
Do they break that down at all by geographic as well too? Like how much square miles
Yeah,
that
they
you're
do.
supposed to be covering?
Well, it's mainly by population, but they'll break it down in certain areas. Like, they'll say the Northeast 2.7, but then they'll break it down even smaller. They'll look at all the Central Mass departments in the area, so. They're pretty accurate. I mean, all their numbers are based on, you know, crimes committed, arrest numbers, incidents, accidents, so they're pretty thorough. So they're usually spot on. So the way we run the department, we try and run at least 2 full-time officers per shift, which, depending on vacation time and any other commitments, training or whatever, it could be a full-time officer and a part-time officer, but we never run less than 2. Ideally, it would be good if we could have 3. Obviously, the 3 to 11 statistically is usually the busiest shift. Day shift, we have 2 patrolmen assigned to patrol the town, plus you have the administrative staff on, you have the school resource officer in the school, so if something happened, he could obviously break away, but myself is, you know, is on, and you get the detective and the court officer are usually on as well. So we have some extra bodies during the day. The busiest shift is 3 to 11, so we try to schedule 3 for the 3 to 11, but again, with vacation time and other commitments, you could be down to 2. In the overnights, we try and schedule 3, but sometimes we'll run it with 2 as well.
Okay.
So, as far as vehicles in the department, right now we have 7. One of them is a 2008 Crown Vic with over 250,000 miles on it. So that's the last Crown Vic that we'll probably see when they stop making those. Then we have 6 line cars that we use, that are used on a regular basis, rotated out. 2 of those cars are scheduled to be replaced next fiscal year. So the 2 cars that are being replaced, one of them has 103,000 miles on it, and the other one has 105,000 miles on it. When we bought those, they had a 5-year warranty, 5-year, 100,000-mile warranty. So they're past their service life. So on those 2 cars, we've had some increased maintenance for the past couple of years. So we're, based on our new schedule, we're scheduled to do 2 next fiscal year, 2 the following year, and 2 the year after that. If you guys remember, which I'm sure you do, we went back probably going on 6 years now, when we changed the way we purchased the cars. We used to do 6 at a time, we used to do a lease purchase, we got away from that, we purchased 2, 2, and 2. So now we're coming up on that 5-year window where the first 2 that we purchase have to be replaced. So
And we have that money for that. The money is in the budget for that, in the town budget proposal.
And not to get ahead, but if you look at the 5-year plan, I added another car to the fleet in 2022, and that was contingent upon if everything else went through, of adding an officer in 2021, and then 2023, looking at it, well, you have 2 more officers, you need another car to rotate in for those 2 officers.
Excuse me, Chief,
Sure.
were you looking to the fact that Douglas may pass a certain population level in order to justify a new officer during that year?
Well, if we look at, if we use those numbers right now, the 1.9, we should be at 16, we were 14 plus the chief, 16. So if we use the numbers right now, I'm looking at it like with the population going up, where we are right now, going up a little bit, and to try and get to that point where we can staff 3 officers on a shift. Again, we try and do that, but with the vacation time and training and everything else, so to have those 2 extra bodies is gonna put you consistently able to run 3
So
on
is
your time.
is it more your lack of officers or lack of budget dollars that do not allow you to keep 3 on every shift? I guess maybe a
Well,
combination of both.
yeah, it's, if you look at what it would, if you were to do that, if you were to run a minimum manning 3 with the amount of office that we have, it would just kill you in overtime.
Yeah.
So we don't do it.
You just don't have enough personnel to run them through.
Right. If you had the extra personnel, it's gonna cost you more money, but in the long run, you're probably saving, because what you're paying that officer yearly is not a fraction of what it would cost you in overtime if you're trying to backfill
Right.
all those shifts. And we get to use the part-timers too, and dispatches, which I'll explain to you later, but it's basically the staffing.
So, one other point, and that's regarding the FBI's numbers, which I used to have chats with Chief Foley about
Yeah.
as well. Because I think they use, if I'm not mistaken, they use large cities as well
They do.
in coming up with those numbers. So you've got Boston, New York, but that's Northeast, I mean, so,
Yeah, and that's why I went, even with this, I went down to the lowest number that they had, where they broke it down to Central Mass. Because the original, you look at it, they'll say the Northeast, 2.7.
Yeah.
And that's where those cities and.
I'd love
the
to
big
see
towns-
Blackstone Valley
Right,
rather than just even Central Mass, because Central Mass includes Worcester, Fitchburg, Leominster, Gardner, Springfield. Is Springfield? I don't think so. I think that's
Western.
Western Mass.
but still, even Worcester, if you factor them into the group, it's gonna skew the numbers.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
my goal would be ideally is to staff the shifts adequately and have the bodies on. So you're looking
Period.
at, right, during the day, you can get away with 2 patrolmen because there's administrative staff
Yep.
on who can respond if needed.
Mhm.
The 3 to 11 is the shift that really suffers, because that's the busiest shift, and there should be 3 people on. We'll never run with less than 2, because my opinion is those days are over.
Yeah.
Working by yourself as a police officer, it's not conducive. Someone's gonna get hurt if you do that. So the minimum we'll run with is 2. Ideally, it would be nice to get to 3, at least on that 3 to 11 shift.
Have we run into any situations where, because of the understaffing, incidents have happened, or or rather you've run into, problems, basically. You don't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
enough to
Certainly, yeah.
respond.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like I said, it happens on a 3 to 11 shift where you had 3 scheduled and for one reason or another, you weren't able to backfill it. And so now you only have 2 people on and, you know, it's a Saturday and State Park's full, you're answering calls.
So throughout the year, we have had
It
incidences
happens,
where
yeah. And it's impossible to predict because you don't know, you could think you're gonna have a nice quiet Tuesday evening and something major could happen. You should.
Just as a follow-on, because I don't think this question's ever been asked or answered. If that occurs, who's your backup? Is it the state police? Is it a neighboring town? Do you call your officers in from home?
Yeah, well, a lot of times we'll use mutual aid, which will be the closest surrounding
Right.
town, so depending on where it is. The state police out of Millbury, they usually have guys separated, they have east and west patrols, and someone might be on 146 that day,
Yep.
but someone might be on 495 too. So the first thing we do is we call the surrounding towns, wherever the call is closest to, and they do the same thing with us. We use mutual aid all the time, they use us, we use them.
Thank you.
Chief, when you're talking about the overtime, do you take in consideration though, that when you hire a new person, you're gonna have to pay health insurance on them and pensions on them and holidays and, you know, so all of those things that are added in. Sometimes overtime isn't really as bad as what you think. I know that when I ran a company, I know they had to pay time and a half for overtime, but when I looked into the other things, it was a lot of times better just to do the overtime, and they kind of appreciated getting the extra money as well. Have you looked into really crunch the numbers real good on that?
Well, I don't really crunch numbers on the insurance, but Gene does for me. And, yeah, I do know it could be a significant change, but the overtime rates too, it adds up quick. So I'd have to really take a look at what the total cost would be for benefits.
We haven't had a change in staff in a number of years.
Right.
If anything, we took a reduction in that department.
Yeah, I think, I have some numbers here going back to 2013. We were at 15 officers in 2013. So 2013, we had 11,048 calls for service, 284 arrests, and 269 incidents, and we investigated 120 crashes. In 2017, with 15 officers, we had 12,454 calls, which is 1,406 more, 592 arrests, which is 308 more, and 394 incidents, which is 125 more, and another 21 crashes on top of the 120, which was 141. So calls for service is going up. You know, again, in 2013, 4 years ago, with the same amount of, 5 years ago, with the same amount of officers, just an increase in calls. And it has gone up gradually every year since 2013.
do you have a personal policy as to how many hours you would not want an officer to go over? Is it in a set week? How
In a
many?
set week, we haven't run into that problem, but, you know, they're not allowed to work, obviously, more than 16 hours at a time, so 16 hours on, 8 hours off. But, you know, the way we use our part-timers, and try to avoid using the overtime, we haven't had that issue.
Do you have difficulty getting part-timers? I would think you would.
Not really, because we have a good feeder system. What we do is we usually start people out as part-time dispatchers, let them work their way up to being a part-time officer, and it gives them a chance to go through the process. It works out, they start dispatching, we get to know them. Once they get to a certain point, if they want to be police officers, we'll send them to the part-time academy. They get part-time certified, then they can work part-time on the road with a full-timer, get some experience, and then when something opens up full-time, if somebody leaves and we have to fill a position, we usually don't have a problem hiring because those part-timers are waiting in the wings and ready to go. They're looking for a full-time job.
With those part-timers, so say they work 20 hours dispatcher, 20 hours of part-time police officer, do we offer them insurance or no, because it's each one, is there less than
Well,
9?
they have to go over a certain number of hours a year.
But is it per position or is it combined?
No,
It's combined, but we don't tend to reach those hours.
No. We have enough of them where we can spread them out. Some part-timers will work 16 hours a week.
Yeah.
Some weeks they'll get 16, some weeks they'll get 24, one week they might get 8, one week they might get nothing, depending on what it is, what time of year it
Do
is.
they try to work somewhere else and you can't live on 8
A lot
hours
of
a
them,
week?
no, a lot of them have full-time jobs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
a lot of them have full-time jobs. Again, in FY18, we secured 3 grants. 2 of them were 911 grants, combined 32,184. So 22,184 of that could be used for part-time dispatch salaries, and 10,000 of that could be used towards dispatch training. Those were 911 grants. So that took care of all of our training fees for the dispatchers, and we're also able to put 22,184 towards dispatch shifts, which gave me coverage of another 161 shifts. That, if we didn't have that grant, would either be overtime or come out of our own part-time account. We also received a $10,000 grant from the Governor Highway Safety Bureau for traffic enforcement and some equipment. So that grant was issued through the state, but it was a federal grant, so it runs from October to the end of September. So it's part of this year and will run into next year. So that gives us about $6,000 that can be used on overtime traffic enforcement patrols. That doesn't cost us anything, and we're gonna be able to buy about $4,000 worth of equipment, which we're looking at buying portable breath tests and to have one in every car. Right now, we only have one, but after this grant, we'll be able to purchase 4 of them, so there'll be one in every
Are
car.
they reliable now though?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and you can't use them in court, but they're
Okay.
certainly reliable.
For your,
Or you can use them in court in 50 other states, you just can't use them in court in Massachusetts. Yeah, so. Yeah,
Land of the free.
yeah, yeah.
So what do you need, a blood test to use it in court?
No, if someone gets arrested, it's just a
They
field
can
sobriety,
test it.
yeah, it's a field sobriety test, so you can use it to get their blood alcohol content on the side of the street, you just can't use it in court. We bring it back here and give them an opportunity to take a regular look. But they're a good tool to have, on the side of the road, and it gives you a good idea. So that's basically where we're at as far as, our status and what we're doing for grants and where we are personnel-wise and what we're looking to do with the cars. Any questions at this point?
I have one on the cars, I brought this up in the past. Is there any way, so currently we're kind of on, if we stick with 6 cruisers, we do 2 a year for 3 years, and then we take 2 years off, and that money has to go somewhere else in the budget and then come back. Is there any way we can do one car a year, that way that's one line item in the budget for every year, and then we'll probably need to find money for 1 or 2, but that just seems like an easier budgeting model, and then there's less shifting back and forth.
I thought that's what we were gonna do, personally.
Well, I think we intended to, and then we went a couple of years back in early 2000s.
Right, we were in
We're in
a
crunch.
situation
Yeah.
where we had to do 2, 2, and 2.
Right.
But we went from 6 on, 6 off, so, that going 2, 2, 2 was actually a big step for us to do. I don't know where the crews stand now, whether or not we can start spreading that out a little bit more.
I mean, it's certainly something we could look at and probably next year, like, right now, the first 2 that are ready to go, one has 103,515 on it, and one has 105,668. Now, we had one that was involved, a 2014, that was totaled in a crash, so that got us a new one.
Right.
So it looks like if we were able to get the 2 this year, looking at the mileage on the other one, it's right now it's 75,908, and other one's in the 80s, and one other one's in 64,000, which is the supervisor's car. So it's certainly something to look at.
Okay. This is weird.
I don't think we could have done it when we made the initial change. I think we were looking at it one more
Right, I
step.
definitely don't think we could do it last time, but, I mean, and it's just, if you don't kind of set the plan, what tends to happen is, we can always find use for that money somewhere else, and so we wait till it's absolutely needed, as opposed to, if you just put one in there, I just think.
Can we do one every year?
That would be my
Yeah.
thought, is if at some point down the road, we can get to one every
I mean, I don't know
year.
whether you could rotate to that.
You have the line item in there, and now we don't have to worry about finding money for the years we're on,
Well,
and,
you have to,
not finding money, excuse me.
Yeah.
Yes.
finding money from other
Thank you,
departments.
Matt. Thank you,
Fi-
Matt.
Yes, finding money from other departments to put it in here as opposed to.
Reallocating maybe?
It's okay,
Yeah,
the library
yeah.
director's not here.
Nice. Reallocating is definitely a better way to find it. Okay.
But I would say that's certainly something that we can look at.
None of us were paying attention, so it's.
I have a question. Do you plan on going for more of these grants every year?
Yeah, we go for whatever.
Because that's pretty huge.
Yeah, the thing is with that, it's tough to budget with the 911 grants because they don't usually advertise until after town meeting and they're not etched in stone. You don't know if they're gonna be there from year to year. Usually they don't post them till the end of May and even the beginning of June for the following fiscal year. But it is a great help to us because that gives us a little wiggle room when it comes to our, like I said, that 22,184 allowed us to backfill, like those shifts that we were talking about that were down to 2. 161 of those shifts, I was able to take a full-time dispatcher who's also a part-time officer off the desk, put him on the road for that extra person, and then fill that dispatch shift with a part-time dispatcher that was paid for by the grant. So you're paying, 17, 18 an hour compared to close to $50 an hour. So I can start going through the budget if you'd like.
I just have one quick question. Are we on the new Mass 911 dispatching?
Yes.
We are on.
Yeah. Yeah, the new 911 system, yes, we are. Okay, so, starting with the salaries and the compensation, your first item is the salaries, that's for myself and the lieutenant. The second one is for all full-time personnel, which covers 4 sergeants, 9 patrolmen, and 4 full-time dispatchers.
So just looking at these numbers, with these numbers, are we hoping to add 1 police officer in 21 and 1 in 23? Is that what those numbers represent?
Right, if you look,
We're missing the top.
Yeah, with the headings.
They're on the
Just have to
small
write it
sheet.
in.
Yep.
On the
Yeah.
small
oh,
sheet.
for
So-
each column, so,
The shaded columns are 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23.
Oh, top.
Right, those are-
Gotcha.
yeah, so if you look at the salaries where, in 21, that's adding 1 patrolman, so that brings us to 16 full-time altogether, including me. And then if you go to 23, another one is added, which would bring us to 17, including me.
Okay,
That's why there's such a big jump there.
okay, thank you.
So 51,200 is the part-time wages. Now that covers a lot of the officer time off with part-time officers and all of the dispatch time off. That includes sick time, vacation time. Some of the shifts in there are for part-time officer coverage, but the majority of it goes to fill the dispatch shifts, the part-time dispatch shifts. 51,300 is the overtime. Overtime expenses are for any extended investigation, extended shifts, cover some holiday, vacation time, sick calls. Whatever I can't fill with a part-timer usually goes to overtime. So there's court time, so I looked back, when I increased it by 150 hours, we've been using about 2,100 hours of overtime per year over around the last 3 years. So I bumped it up 150 hours based on that trend. And this reflects all of the hourly rates, starting from the lowest patrolman up to the highest patrolman and sergeants.
So the numbers on here are different than the numbers on this?
This was the later version.
They should,
of the budget, but I think
Yeah, no, they should be the same.
Looking at 5,1,
In 51,300, it should be 109,369.
Yeah, that's right.
Under the overtime.
I don't have any memo.
That's right. Oh, you're looking on the wrong side.
That's why.
No, that's right.
That's right. Okay, that
Okay.
makes more sense, thank you.
All right. The education incentive, that is contractual, so the officers get a certain amount for having a degree. So that totals out to $58,000.
When they earn the degree or every year?
So they get paid yearly.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's 4,000 for an associate, 7,000 for a bachelor's, and gets paid bi-weekly.
It's a bonus,
Yeah,
Oh,
An educational incentive.
yeah.
educational incentive.
So, and the next one, 51,420, is the differential wages. I looked at that too, and because of the way we move some shifts around, so if one shift is short, we'll take, so if there's 3 people working the overnight, and there's 2 people scheduled to work the 3 to 11, and someone called in sick, or took a vacation day, or whatever, personal day, someone from the 3 to 11 could bump down. Same thing with day shift, someone from the 3 to 11 who would have normally got paid differential can bump down. So I looked at the trend on that too, and that account was a little high, so I reduced that account by $6,000, and it looks like we're on track to keep that in that 17,155 area as long as those numbers stay the same. The longevity, again, is for years of service. So right now, we have 3 that are currently 25 to 30-year veterans. 3 have 15 to 20 years, and 5 are in the category from 10 to 15. So a lot of our people are getting up there in time longevity, and so that's where that number is 13 too. If you see, it bounces around a little bit as you go down to 5 years. In 2020, I'm anticipating a retirement, so it'll go down, but somebody will come, it'll go down from the higher amount, but somebody will be moving up into another category, so it's a couple $100 either way. Uniform allowance is the same per the contract, and you'll see that move along the line, and that's if the new officers are added. That's what the additional is for.
how much is that actually gonna?
Uniform allowance is 1,700 a year.
I mean, how much is it, how many uniforms?
Oh, no, it sounds
2,
like a lot,
3?
yeah, but it's not that much. I mean, the uniforms, the pant and shirt is over $200.
Right, they have to be embroidered, right?
Yeah, so it is pretty expensive. I think they mark them up. There's only a couple places that you can buy them, and
So I assume they buy their own as well?
yeah, they
'Cause
get
you-
paid twice a year, $850, 2 times a year.
I would assume
Is that for
two
cleaning too?
uniforms is not
Yeah.
acceptable.
No, so, yeah, it is for cleaning. A couple of years ago, we combined it in the contract. It used to be X amount of dollars for clothing, X amount of dollars for cleaning, dry cleaning. So they just combined it, and they agreed to the $1,700 a year. Okay, so we can move to expenses. 51,901 is the tuition reimbursement. Each year, if officers are attending school, working towards a college degree, they have the opportunity to get reimbursed up to $2,000 a year, so they have to let us know in the previous fiscal year if they intend on taking classes. So 4 people told me that they intended on taking classes, so that's why that's at $8,000.
Okay.
That stays the same. Repairs and maintenance, I increased that a little bit, and that was only based on when I looked at the trends of what we've been paying over the last couple of years. It seems to run, depending on what year you look at, between $36,000 and $40,000. Now, we got a couple of cars that are getting up there in mileage, so I'm only anticipating if these 2 don't get changed out, that we're gonna have some increase
Repair
in
costs.
repair costs. So that's where that's at. Training and conferences, that was increased by $4,000, and again, that was based on looking back at the trends and what we spent out of that account. every officer is required to have at least 40 hours of training. So we try and do a lot of our required in-service training, which is 32 hours through the training committee. We try to do that online. Years ago, well, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, we used to have to take a week, go up to Boylston. So that was a headache, because you had to send somebody to Boylston for a week. You had to backfill their shift, which cost us extra money. So now we can basically get everybody's in-service training done online to get that required training out of the way, which is the 32 hours, and you can do that at a fairly decent price of about $200, $225 an officer.
Okay.
And that's all of them, part-time and full-time?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's all, and that covers all the full-time, part-time officers. But in addition to that, there's specialized training some of these officers have to go to just to keep up their certifications. So we have a firearms instructor who has to go to certain certification training every year. We have an armorer who has to be certified every year, every couple of years. Accident reconstruction, who has to keep up his certifications. It's almost a certification for everything, and almost all of them expire. And those classes can range from $150 to up to $600. So, in addition to that, if something comes up where we have to send somebody to the police academy, that's a $3,000 tuition bill. And we've run into that a couple of times where someone leaves in the middle of the year, or someone decides to retire, or something happens one way or the other where we have to send somebody to the academy. Again, that's $3,000 over unexpected. And $12,350, looking back, like I said, at the trends where we were spending out of that account, that's still lower than I would like it. I mean, ideally, for a department of 15 full-time officers, you want to be up around $20,000. I just know that's not a reality, but you can never get enough training. Failure to train in law enforcement, in the fire services, it's a liability. Because if something happens, that's the first thing they go after is your training records. So we try and do as much of that as we can, and a lot of it we do for cheap online, but there's certain things that we do have to pay for.
Okay.
The telephone was a slight increase of $310. Again, that was based on trend, looking back over a couple of years where we were at and what we've been paying for the phone. Postage stays the same. Our cell service stayed the same. Looking back at the trend, we were just slightly under $8,000, and that pays for all our air cards for our mobile computers, and we have 3 cell phones.
Okay.
Other services, so that pays for a lot of things that we need to have done on a regular basis, and some not so much on a regular basis. Things you don't normally think about. Someone spits or throws up or does something in the cell, you have to have the cells decontaminated. There's a cost for that. You have to have a company come in and take care of that. Same thing with the cruisers. They'll do that for the cruisers. If a new hire comes up, we have to send somebody to the academy. We have to send it for a medical and psychological exam. Some cleaning services for the station. Again, looking back at this account for 30 months, on an average, we were spending, it looks like we spent about $399 a month. So that's what I based that increase on, to get us to that $3,800. Same thing with office supplies. Looking back at a 30-month trend, we were spending about $450 per month. Now, we go through a ton of paper, and the ink cartridges are expensive, and we go through a lot of ink. I mean, everything we do for the court, we have to do. You look at close to 600 arrests, so that's 600 packets that are going down the court. We have to make 4 copies for, to send down to the court. So that's all we do, a lot of printing. So that's where a lot of our expense in office supplies goes to ink.
Is it ink or laser?
We have a couple laser printers. The building maintenance has stayed the same, with $700. The custodial supplies, we were able to decrease by a couple $100. The vehicle supplies, again, we looked back at that and we decreased it by $825. And in the vehicle supplies, this is where we buy all the cleaning stuff, in the tires. That's the biggest expense out of that line item, and anything else that we need, like headlights, bulbs, stuff like that. And, you know, a headlight bulb for a cruiser in that make of car is like $175, close to $200. So, in some years, we don't spend as much out of that account because depending on what we have for tires left and what kind of shape they're in, we might be able to skip a season. So it all depends on what kind of shape the tires are in and what kind of year we have. In the gasoline, we decreased it by 1,345, and the price we used for that is Mr. Wolf gave us a fuel index to go by, and we researched the amount of gallons that we were using over the last 3 years, and on average, we think that's going to bring us to about 34,655. Moving on to the food, this line item that takes care of prisoner meals, and also we have somebody in the academy that we have to pay for meals while he's there. He's there Monday through Friday, and he's required to have a meal program. The books, the law books, we decreased by $200. The other supplies, we increased by $5,500 because that, again, is like the other services account. We looked back 30 months and we saw what we were spending out of there, and it came to that average of $873 a month. So that's where we budgeted it at 10.5, and that covers evidence, supplies, hinge lifters, whatever we need for crime scene stuff, ammunition for all the qualifications.
So that's just ammunition, it's just for the qualifications and stuff for regular range time?
Right.
So the officers actually provide their own ammunition for
For
regular
range
range
time, if
time?
they go to range, yeah. So, and we qualify, we're required to qualify twice a year, and we try and go 3 times a year, just because we like to do, call it a low light shoot, dusk shoot, you know, in the evening. So we're required to do the 2 qualifications, which is, you know, you look at 200 rounds at a minimum per officer, you know, 21 officers. And that also covers academy equipment, any other supplies that they need for the academy. In-state travel was decreased by $450. Training and education was decreased by $100. Out-of-state travel was decreased by $750. The dues and membership was increased by $675, just with some anticipated membership increases. We're doing the accreditation this year, so that is expected to go up. So that's why that's where that is at. The additional equipment, you'll see that for the previous years, 2 years, there was nothing in that line item. So we need to replace some of our computers and at least one of our AEDs if our capital request does not go through. Chief Vincent made a capital request to redo all the AEDs for the police and the fire department. So ours are beyond their time, so we're looking to replace that. If that capital request goes through, I'll be able to take that AED off there.
What is it, AED?
It's an automated external defibrillator, one of the portable defibrillators that we carry in the cruisers.
I guess that's pretty important.
It is, it is.
You didn't tell me what it was.
So that is why that $4,200 is there. We need to replace a couple of the computers in the AED. The replace equipment stays the same. That's if somebody damages their uniform or something in the line of duty, making an arrest, their pants are ripped or whatever, it's contractual. So the total expenses is $148,490. And if you go back and look through those accounts, 9 of those accounts were increased, but 7 were decreased and 5 stayed the same. So I just basically tried to move some money around and put the amounts in the accounts where they belong based on a look back at the past 30 months. And at the end, you have that 79.5 added in there for the cruisers.
Anybody have any further questions for the chief?
After the 79.5, it says per estimate, but that's per 2 vehicles. correct?
Yeah, that's 2 vehicles replacing the equipment, and that's, if you look at what's out there, there's, there's Fords, there's Dodges, there's a couple different options, but they're all basically around the same price, based on the state bid, so we think we can get it done for that amount. We'll shop around.
Anyone else with any questions?
No, this was a nice job. I like this, the 5 years back and 5 years forward and everything written out. It's really good.
I think I have extra. All set?
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Chief.
very much.
Thanks for your time.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Yes, you too. I would love to, but other commitments. Thank you.
Next up for the fire and ambulance is Chief Vincent. Chief? This evening?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present before you folks again. If I could, I just wanted to more or less, I haven't seen you folks for a while. I think saw you in the fall when we came for monitors. Those have been purchased. They've been very helpful. They're on the ambulances. I would say they're already responsible for saving a couple of lives, so that's a good thing. I just wanted to more or less look back at this last year and see, and sort of give you a synopsis of where we're at since last January. Our statistics right now are we have 22 firefighters, 5 of them are paramedics, 8 are EMTs, and we have 1 hazmat technician that operates on the state hazmat team, but her knowledge is valuable when it comes to those type of chemical or hazardous materials incidents. Statistics last year, we know that we had 300 fire calls. We also had 926 ambulance calls, which was a 189 call increase, which is about a 20% increase over the previous year. 328 inspections, and we did 274 burning permits. So as you can imagine with the burning permits, you have to have people in the station on the weekend too to answer the phones when people call in to burn, so that creates a little bit of an expense. But today's modern fire department does more than just fight structure fires. We have multiple responsibilities that, we're sort of pigeonholed with the title fire department, but we operate at structure fires, vehicle and wildland fires, motor vehicle crashes. Obviously, a big part of what we do now is in medical emergencies and paramedic type stuff. We also deal with people that are trapped in buildings, and we just, right when I was preparing this tonight, we had a hazardous materials call, which was somebody mixed ammonia and bleach. So that's a situation that's a little dicey. So that was one of those things where I had to pull back a little bit, make sure we had enough resources on scene, put people on air, go in and sort of look at that situation. But, as you can see, we've evolved over the years, the necessities of the community and appeals for help. And when people call us, we come and we help and mitigate things as best we can. There's a lot of risk management that goes, listening to Chief Miglianico, cruisers and things like that, trying to plan down the road, when can we replace that, when can we do this? And our effort really is to keep the community, the citizens as safe as possible. We also do that through fire prevention. Some of you have had us come when you sell your house. We have to do a carbon monoxide, smoke detector inspection, things like that. We do a lot of education in the public as far as that goes. We have a program that's state funded, that we go into the schools and we teach children about fire and how to always have 2 ways out, escape plans, things like that. And then we hope they bring that home to the parents. Also, what came about a couple of years ago was the Senior Safe program, where we can actually go in and help the senior citizens and re-educate or give them certain reminders in ways that they can keep them safe. And the state looked at it, and basically, we're looking at two vulnerable populations, the children and then the senior citizens. We brought the children under control, and there was a lot less fire deaths, and then we started seeing senior citizens being involved in fatalities, so that's been addressed. But when tragedy strikes, we respond, we try to make it better. Many of you remember this past year, I think a year ago, January, we went with the authorization of the selectmen and town meeting to increase our staffing. And that was basically because we were having ambulance calls on the overnight that, we just weren't able to answer in a timely fashion. And NFPA 1710, which is really the standard we use for best practice, really required us and advises you to have a minimum benchmark for response times. And our response times over the overnight, because people were home in bed, were 15, 16 minutes. When we went to the new model with, when we spread out our paramedics and had people in the station 24/7, it upped our numbers as far as employees, but it slashed our response times in half. So now we're between 5 and 6 minutes for a response time. NFPA 1710 requires 8 minutes and 59 seconds 90% of the time. So we're easily past that now with the addition of staffing there. And really what that is utilizing EMTs along with paramedics. And remember that they're cross-trained so that whatever call comes in, whether it's a fire or an ambulance call, they're dealing with that. And that's certainly been beneficial. We've had a couple of cardiac arrests saved since December. You also understand right now we're in an opioid crisis where we're dealing with overdoses, that there's a small window where you can get to somebody with a Narcan and turn that around. But a lot of times time has gone by and it's a cardiac arrest by the time you get there. But use the Narcan, you can turn that situation around if not too much time has gone around. We've trained the police in that as well, so they're carrying Narcan, but that's coming out of our budget, so we're supplying that. And the reason for that is, we have a food and drug license, so we purchase it that way. And so we just pass that along to the police, make sure that all their Narcan is in the cruisers and meets the standards and whatnot. The other thing we did last year was we added a rescue pumper. That's a 1,500 gallon per minute fire truck that streamlined we got rid of our old rescue truck. It streamlined our engine so that we had more water to fight fires outside of the water district. Again, 70% of our homes are out of the water district, not in the hydrant district. So it was very important for us to add more additional water so that we can fight fires that are out of the hydrant district. It also has 20 gallons of foam on it. It makes it more efficient because it can carry 6 firefighters. So you have fire suppression capabilities and also extrication capabilities for motor vehicle crashes all in that one unit. So it helps us give our old engine 1 a needed rest so that we can stretch it out a little bit longer. It certainly has helped us out in that way. One of the other things that happened in August, last spring, ISO came out, Insurance Services Organization. And what they do is they audit your department, or they do a survey, they call it. But they come in and they tear apart your records. They want to see your training records. They want to know how your staffing levels are. They want to look at your apparatus and see if you're keeping the maintenance records on that. One of the things that they really looked at, which surprised me, but we were ahead of the curve, was they wanted to see our driver training records. In other words, if we have a new employee or a new firefighter and they're going to be driving an apparatus, what is the training process that they're going through? What are you logging for drive time and things like that? And we were able to provide that. And so I just want to expand a little bit more on the ISO. What they do is what's called a public protection classification. And how does that affect you as a homeowner? What it does is they have a scale and they will come in and rate your department based on that scale. We were a 6/9 prior to that spring. We went down to a 4/4 which is, it's a lower number, but that lower number means that you're less of a liability, and so that lowers your insurance rates. When your insurance company wants to take you on as a client, first thing they do is they call the fire department. Where's the closest hydrant from this house? Those are things they want to know. We can't get any better really than a 4/4 unless we were to redo our whole water system and hydrant our town throughout. Now, there are other towns that don't have that good of a classification, and yet their water system is far exceeds ours. You know, a town like Webster has hydrants everywhere and good pressure. That's really not the case with us. So, happy to say that number came down, and that savings will be passed on to the citizen, and so that's a good thing as well. Let's see what else here. Oh, I would say looking at why the reason the ISO rating came down, I would say it's because they recognize we invested and we're slashing our response times, we're having additional help on the overnights. Improvements in the fleet, additional water, seeing that we're having more water on the road in the fire trucks. And then all the training records, driver training and maintenance records for testing and compliance. We have to have our pumps tested, our ladders tested, our aerial tested, all that type stuff. And when you can produce that documentation, there's a win because you're less of a liability. So, one of the other things I wanted to bring up was as far as collections, looking at the ambulance collections, we adjusted the rates just prior to Mr. Wojcik coming in, and I adjusted the rates, and happy to say that we're about $80,000 ahead of last year, what we collected at the same time last year. We're about $80,000 ahead on that. So the hope is that come town meeting, we will have closed that gap that where we had to move money down into the fall town meeting. So hopefully that trend continues because we are collecting more. So that's a good thing.
Is that due to a better collections? Have we changed?
I would say it's a
collection
combination, but
company?
I also adjusted the rates where, I'll tell you what we did. Is we sat down and we looked at some other departments, and I talked to another chief who's got a business degree in business administration and really immersed himself in the collections part when he became a chief. And we sat down and we picked apart our calls and what our Medicare ratio was in town and whatnot. And what we decided we were gonna do, we raised our rates to a certain degree. But what we did was, we bundled everything. Before we had a bundle, but that bundle itemized everything. So now what we did was, we went up on now we have a flat rate. A BLS rate for a basic life support call. Then we have an ALS 1 rate, advanced life support 1, which means IV O2 monitor, okay, a cardiac monitor and an IV. And it would be one medication. But as soon as you hit a second medication, if you have to give a second medication, it boosts it up to the ALS 2, which is more of an expensive run. An example of an ALS 2 would be a cardiac arrest. You do an IV O2 monitor, CPR machine, and you're doing multiple rounds of epinephrine or maybe sodium bicarb or something like that. So as soon as you hit that second, if you hit an intubation where you put a tube in somebody's throat, it brings it up to that ALS 2. So I looked at some of the other towns, I thought, wow, they're really expensive. And then after sitting with this gentleman, it's like, no, they're doing things correct way. Because what will happen is an insurance company or that would say, well, the patient said you didn't start an IV on that call. So they'd start to itemize things and start to check things out. So if you just have the 3 flat rates and it bills, it seems to have been more successful in bringing our rates.
You changed companies as well, did you not?
We changed companies 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, it was 2 years ago?
Not recently. It's been at least 2 years now. It's at least 2 years.
So are the insurance companies paying the new rates?
Yes.
They are.
So what we did was we maximized, you have insurance companies that will pay the full rate, and then you have the ones that you're abating right up front, like the Medicare and the Medicaid. So what you're doing is you're getting the maximum out of the people that will pay.
Yeah, right.
So,
And
we've
it's
been
valid.
sort of successful that way, and I'm hoping that continues.
Is Fallon now finally paying you directly instead of sending the checks to the patient?
Yeah, I mean, the Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts they're on Beacon Hill and just fighting that. And it seems Blue Cross has backed off on that, but it was an issue. It was an issue.
No, Fallon was sending the money to the patient. The patient, oh, look at the money I got.
Oh, I got a refund, and go out and spend it. And then you
Right,
gotta see
right
your
before
money.
Christmas, how convenient.
So we're trying to streamline that stuff, and I'm thinking that's some good news, I would feel, is some good news. It's a positive stuff to share, but. Next would be, if you like, we can go through the budget, unless anyone has any other questions.
Can we talk about the proposed pneumatic first? Before we go through-
Oh, yeah, I'm just trying to find out what I did with my mat sheet. Thank you very much for making it where I could read it. I just had it.
Is it under your folder?
Yes, thank you. All right, so, we're looking at, yeah, I would say looking at the budget, again, this was the instructions were a 5-year budget, which actually was really good because it gave us a chance to really sit down and tear things apart and identify some areas that might not have been as clear. So, there was give us the numbers that you feel you need to run your department. So that's what we did. And then it was worst case scenario. So what we did was, I actually just took my budget, I increased a couple of places. Mostly it was training, conferences and repairs, because especially on the ambulance side. But if you look at the proposed medic thing, you heard Chief Miglianico earlier say, well, there's a standard, we don't really have you have to have 1 per 1,000 or anything like that. But when it comes to firefighting, it's very important that you get the ambulance out. And right now, I feel comfortable with what we're at, like we can go for a while. But I put that in there every year, not expecting to get everybody. I just wanted it there, and then you look at it each year to see if that's actually, if you're at that point where you feel you can need it or you can skate by with it. The one thing we did put in was, we tried to look at it as, I have one gentleman who's in medic school. So when he graduates medic school to operate as a medic, he's going to want to be paid as a medic. So we could deal with that bump to give him the bump, but not have to put in the full, grab him into a whole body somewhere else. We take a basic who's an EMT and bump him up to a medic. That still increases our resources because he's got a bigger skill set. And that's where we're at as far as that goes. So when I talked to Mr. Wojcik, I basically said, listen, I put that in there every year, but that's not what I expect every year. And I had also put it in, I had put in a basic EMT too, which is at $13,000 less. So it's sort of look at where you're at that point and decide each year, is that something that we can sustain? Because obviously I have the goal of keep the town fiscally responsible to the town as well. So it was put in, and if you think about firefighting is a team sport. If you really have an engine roll out the door, you should have 3 to 4 people on that engine. It's just very labor intensive to move hose lines and cut roofs and climb on buildings in different types of weather. And then also, they're equipped to actually work on that ambulance. So they go out the first call. And eventually, right now we have 2 on a shift. We have a medic and an EMT on a shift. One shift we have 2 medics and 1 EMT. What I do with that 4th medic is overtime. If someone's on vacation, instead of paying overtime, I move them over to cover that slot. So that we're not down and we're not paying overtime for vacations. Does that make sense? So you want to start right from the top and go right down, or you
Yeah,
want to just hit the highlights?
Let's go through the compensation fairly,
Okay.
let's hit one there, and then when we get to the expenses, if you could just kind of hit the top 4 or 5 increases, I think
Sure.
that would be great.
Which department are you starting
Are
with?
we going with
Fire.
fire?
Let's start at fire, I'm sorry, yes.
So, if you look at fire 1100 is my salary is half comes out of fire and half comes out of ambulance. So that's that top number. And then you have the four combined, you get 2 medics and 2 EMTs for a total of 4. So you have the full-time salaries are mine and the 243, 676. So that's actually 5 employees, okay? And then you have the proposed medic that we already talked about. Skip over that, come down, and I also had a proposed basic, but that number's not there. That's more like 48,000 if you put that, at a step 1, okay? Then you have the clerk, who's basically admin, does some work with the billing company, works closely with the billing company, works with anything where people come in and have cards and whatnot. I should say insurance cards. She's that 17,581, and half of her salary comes out of EMS, and half of her salary comes out of fire. Then you have part-time wages. This is one of the areas that I bumped up. We were about, let's see, it was 26,695. That covered the call firefighters. And the call firefighters are very important. It's a situation where, in my opinion, we're never gonna stray away from a call force, as long as we can keep people coming to the call force, because there is a reduction in volunteerism and people that wanna do, because there's a lot of training that is involved with it to stay a firefighter and to stay sharp. But that was 965 last year. We bumped that up to pay the guys for training and some conferences and whatnot. I should say for training. So what we did was we took everybody's salary, or what their hourly rate was, we calculated. They usually train twice a month, 6 hours, twice. So for a total of 6 hours, times their rate, times everybody that was at that rate. And it came out to about $15,000 for training. So we put a little bit of a buffer there.
So everyone gets trained 6 hours a month, is that what you said? Did I hear
Yes.
that? Yeah.
That's the 6 hours a month. Now, the base training to go to the fire academy, to become a firefighter, that's a 240-hour class.
Right.
We're not paying them a dime to do that. The town doesn't pay, we pay for their book maybe, their book to go to the class. But the training is covered at the fire academy. It's not, there's no cost to it.
Okay.
If we were to send them to full-time, this is a call volunteer program. It's at night, it's 2 nights and a weekend. If they were to go to the full-time recruit, like I did when I first started, you're there for 11 weeks, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. So you're being paid your salary to be there. That's tough, that's a tough nut to crack, you know, to have, is it a more intense training? Yes, you're getting more repetitive stuff. You're getting burn days where you're in buildings over and over and over again, where in the call volunteer, you're not getting that much exposure, but you're getting you're getting a standard training, okay? So that's an area we bumped up, is to put them in for training. Overtime, that was 12,000 before. We obviously we have more manpower now. We're 3 guys deep on the fire side, so we bumped that up to 33. And that's to try to cover vacations and when people are on vacations. And there's times where they get a late call, say at 7 o'clock in the morning or 6:30 in the morning. They get a late call, they're gone. They come back, they get overtime for hour for hour.
So I'm not understanding, you have more people, so that means you're gonna increase your overtime. I'm missing something on that logic.
So they work at 56.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is they're at a 56-hour work week.
Yeah.
So what they did, it used to be they used to get paid overtime after 45 hours, okay? When they went to, last year, in their contract, they went away from that, and their concession was, we'll do a 56-hour work week, okay? But the 56-hour work week has to be 212 hours within 28-day period. So if they go over 212 hours in 28 days, which their schedule puts them at 216, so in their schedule, it's 3 hours of overtime a month, so. In order to get that schedule done. So, that's how that works. So, that's FLSA, that's the Fair Labor Standard Act, which is actually a deal, because most departments wanna pay, they wanna be paid over 40 hours or 42 hours overtime.
Right.
You're getting them at a straight pay for another 12 hours a week, so.
Actually, they're scheduled 224,
Right.
and the maximum is 212. So there's a 12-hour per person built-in mandatory overtime. If they work their
That
schedule-
doesn't
if they
sound like a
work
good
their
deal for the town.
It's an excellent deal for the town.
It is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because where are you gonna
I'm
make up
confused.
those, no, because if you're at 45 and you're paying overtime for every hour over 45, now
Sure,
they're on
well,
for
yeah,
56.
right.
It would just blow out of proportion, which is why I like having the fourth medic, especially on vacations, is to move them so that they're covering that vacation, so you're not paying the overtime when they're on vacation.
What were we doing in years past when we were only incurring $9,000 in overtime?
What they did was,
Well,
it
they
used to
weren't
be,
unionized.
pardon me?
They weren't unionized. So
Um,
they didn't have this.
In the beginning, they weren't,
Right.
and then, when they went union, and that's the other thing. That 12,000 or so was eaten up on, basically, they got paid 9 hours for not even, if you had a day off and it was, happened to be a holiday, oh, you got 9 hours pay. You weren't even in. Now they get paid only for the holiday if they work that day. Like say it's Christmas. If it's not your day to work, you don't get the Christmas holiday, so. There's a savings as far as, so that's a concession with the FLSA and also the overtime as far as holiday pay. And then the other guys who were on holiday, they would get 9 hours of overtime plus their straight time while they work, the time and a half, so. That could balloon out of control as well.
Okay.
All right, so, and then, let's see, what, overtime, we just talked about that, and then you have stipends. There's some contractual stipends that are in there as well, and that's 3,500 there. So if you add that up, it's 452,756, I'm sorry, 451,756.
Chief, why did the stipends get cut in half?
One of them was my stipend, that got rolled into my,
Salary.
got rolled into my salary.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Before we move on to expenses, can we talk about the full-time wages line going forward in the future? It seems to ramp up very quickly. We're almost double in 2023, we're more than double what we are in 2023 than we are in 2019. Why does that ramp up so quickly?
Let's see.
The presumption is you're at a medic every single year.
Okay.
Right, that's what
Oh,
that
yeah.
is, but we're not saying that was put there,
Oh, okay.
that number was added in every year, but like I said,
The exercise was
right,
to staff the department according to your professional understanding of the needs of the town. The purpose of doing that with the two public safety departments was to recognize the reality that a good number of budget cuts were made by department heads and the town's administration before they came to the budget process. There is a service level foregone, for lack of a better term. It's what the industry standard would be to staff these departments that the town has elected not to do. Now, just because that's the starting point, clearly you look to other towns that are very close by and see the standards that they're on. And then the professional judgment comes to both of our two strong chiefs. What exactly are they gonna recommend to the town? It will not necessarily be this full staffing model, but it is important to note that it is unlikely that you would go through the entire next 5 years and not add anyone. And this puts the town on notice that it is very close to being a 3-on-the-road town for police officers. And the ICMA, which is the International City County Managers Association. We now pair medics and police officers in terms of numbers. If you have 3 on the road of one, you typically have 3 on the road of the other, because their call volumes and service demand levels actually really do seem to parallel themselves very closely.
What
So
is
at the point you go to 3 on the road with downstairs, his department will end up going 3 on the road. And 3 on the road, when you run any number of shifts a day, that's how many bodies you need, how many shifts you run a week.
What's the difference between the proposed medic line and the increase in the full-time wages, if that's including a medic as well?
No, it rolls up each year.
That's where when I got confused with, I thought this was, we had him here, we had him here, we had. So he's adding 5 medics over 5 years according to this base budget.
So, it's like sort of with the school yesterday. I mean, it'd be nice to go above the net school spending. You know, we try to do that, we hit the minimum, but really, we don't wanna be aiming for the minimum. But looking at, we also have to consider what's the town's ability as well. So, but you wanna know where you should be versus where you can be. You know what I mean? So that's
I guess I have a question of similar to what I asked the chief. Can you recall, any incidences, and if so, how many, that you were dangerously understaffed in responding to the situation over the past couple of years?
Anything where we had fire on arrival, or, you know, people ask all the time, why do you send an engine with an ambulance? Well, why? Because it's very labor intensive to carry somebody down a couple flights of stairs doing CPR, or, you know, it's very easy to get hurt. You need the numbers to spread the work out and make it safe. Safety is the #1 thing. And you're gonna find that, especially with the fact that, you know, just last couple of months ago, we're now OSHA state. We're gonna have to go by OSHA standards, which can get ugly, because we've pushed that safety envelope in a big way. But, you know, we have to make do with what we have sometimes, and we do. And, you know, we've got to, for example, with fire, we have run cards downstairs with the dispatcher. We get to a fire, you know, we do a quick assessment of what we have, and we have it automatic, go to the run card, this area of town, go to a second alarm. It brings me in 4 more engines and 2 tankers. If it's out of the water district, it actually brings in 4 more tankers. So you're using mutual aid, but that's assuming mutual aid's available. Other towns are just as busy and stretched just as thin as we are, so. It just might mean that you're gonna go to a second alarm and immediately go to a third alarm. Or you're gonna be 3 ambulance calls deep and only have 2 ambulances, you know, you're gonna have to get a 3rd ambulance. 1 crash, 5 victims, you got 5 ambulances. So, to answer your question, a lot. You know, I would say 60% of the calls you go on, you can be understaffed. The Drano bleach call tonight, we had 1 guy, I put him on a self-contained breathing apparatus. I don't want to send him in there by himself, okay? So I need another engine down here with a couple guys so I can send a team in to scope this situation out and meter the building. You can get in a bad way fast. It's not.
So there's a real life example. It was a few months ago. You had an individual driving down Main Street through the downtown area of Douglas. Who had overdosed, began to operate the vehicle erratically. Pulled over into one of the side yards, and I was driving out on my way home, and we had 2 cruisers there, an engine and an ambulance. The entire public safety staff in the town of Douglas was in one spot at one time. So any other call anywhere else in town, at that point was gonna be mutual aid, because that was
So you had,
save,
yeah.
right? That was,
Yeah, that was a heroin overdose with somebody not breathing, driving a vehicle.
Oops.
which happens a lot. Remember when the guy drove through GBI's garage? That was another one. So, you know, we don't make a big deal out of it. We've always got it done, but it doesn't mean it was always done safely. You know what I mean?
So when Matt talks about the 3 and 3 model, 3 officers for 3 fire/medics, my belief or understanding was we had 3 officers, so 2 could respond to one and 1 could respond to another incident. Would you do the same, or are you trying to, I don't quite understand, if you went to the 3 model, are you trying to have enough to cover 2 incidents, or enough to have 1 full team to cover 1 incident?
Well, it depends on whether it's an ambulance call or a fire call, and it depends on the type of ambulance call. Is it an ambulance call where the person's on the 2nd floor and they weigh a whole lot of weight? You know, and then you have all this equipment to carry in, you have the police there, who a lot of times will grab bags for you and stuff and help things out. A couple instances, we've had cardiac arrests where they've already had them on a defibrillator and had a couple shocks in before we got there, which is great, it's the way it should be. But quite honestly, when it comes to a fire call, you shouldn't be rolling the truck with at least three people on it. One person can't do anything with a fire truck. It's one person has to run the pump, 2 others have to get and start moving a hose line, and it's very labor-intensive work. So, for a fire call, yeah, you might be able to get an engine out with those 3, and that's a lot of times what we do. During the daytime, we've got a highway superintendent and 2 other guys on the highway department that they'll hear us. If they know we're needed, they come. You know what I'm saying? We have that luxury.
You have no idea how blessed you are
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
to have the people you have at Highway who are cross-trained as volunteer firefighters. If that were not the case, this conversation would be very different. We'd be begging you for a new medic every year.
I mean, numerous occasions.
How many are in this number right now?
Pardon me?
How many do we have right now?
Right now we have 7 plus myself. So you have 5 medics.
You have 7?
5 medics, and then we have 1 medic who's a call firefighter as well, who works full-time in another
It seems like a lot, 7, and you want to add 5 more in the next?
It seems like a lot, but it's
Yeah.
not. It's not. When you talk about the fire service and emergency services, it's not a lot. It's understaffed, but we're getting along. It's a lot better than where we were.
Would you characterize other Blackstone Valley towns around us as understaffed as well, or are they more?
Absolutely. Yeah, we're all understaffed. And that sounds cliche, it's really not. It's really not. Unless you're out there doing the work, it's not. I'll give you a perfect example. I teach at the fire academy. I rub elbows with fire instructors who work for Boston Fire, Worcester Fire. When they show up to a fire incident in Boston, and a one-room, it's a building.
You're not gonna compare Douglas to Boston, please don't do that.
What I'm telling you, you would
You know
think
what I
that's what
mean?
I'm doing. I'm not. What I'm telling you is, they show up 50 guys for a one-room
yeah.
fire. We don't do that. We could never do that.
No,
And I don't expect that to be
so
the case.
don't be jealous of Boston.
No, I'm not jealous of Boston, quite honestly.
You don't want Boston.
I'll curb my
Trust
words
me.
there. Because,
There's such a thing as overstaffed too.
yeah, absolutely. What I'm saying is, sometimes the union's a double-edged sword, okay? What I'm trying to say is, Boston, if you have guys on Boston, they're just assigned to one engine. That's all they do.
Yeah.
We're assigned to, we have to be able to operate ladders, aerial truck, rescue equipment, whereas we're
It's a whole
very
different
diverse.
world.
It's a totally different world, absolutely. They're like, I've been in classes with them, it's like, well, I don't know, why don't you just do this? Well, I don't know, there's no fire hydrant close by, we don't have any fire hydrants. Do you have that problem? What do you mean? It's a total different world, it's a total different world. No, I'm not comparing them.
No.
I'm saying they don't understand really what we do.
That's the city mouse, country mouse,
It absolutely is, absolutely is.
The standard, and the chief will correct me if I'm wrong, is in a fully involved structure fire, it's 14 on the fire ground.
A minimum.
And you will never get 14 from Douglas alone.
No.
So mutual aid is a necessary part of the formula at all times.
Yeah.
You have to be able to get your initial assessment and your first pumper set up by yourself at least on a consistent basis, 24 hours a day. That's really the standard you're operating at right now.
And give it as an example. Very easily, we could have an ambulance call and a fire come in at the same time. That's just, very easily, it's a big, so if you got your two full-timers, they're already on the engine. Okay, that means myself, Deputy Chief Furno, Adam Furno, we're now trying to get the ball rolling at the fire, and we're already trying to stack an alarm before we get there, trying to get resources coming in. So that's what I mean by understaffed. 2 calls, you're already in over your head.
Yeah, I think that's another country mouse, city mouse type of thing.
Maybe it's too expensive.
You know, it's the world we live in, you know. You know, I mean, I could compare Boston and say, when they get 2 feet of snow, they also don't lose electricity for a day and a half.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a different world that we all live in.
Absolutely.
They
But we
don't
can't
get their
expect,
roads plowed either.
and nor do we expect to have their resources. It's not feasible, it's not even responsible, you know.
So we probably shouldn't talk about Boston.
It's just an
It's
example
very
as far as.
irritating to talk about Boston.
It's an example to show you that,
Brian, can you at this point, please?
let's get off that. Let's move on.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's talk about expenses. Chief, you want to hit the 4 or 5
Yep.
high points of this?
Electric, we had 7,900 last year, I should say 7,000, we budgeted 8,900. Heating, let's see here. Trying to-
Yeah.
No,
It's the work there.
it's not that, it's just I'm looking, going, why is heating 8,000,
Went to
why are we 50?
24/7, I think was the logic.
Okay,
And the heating station there.
all right, so,
Well, it's been like that for a couple of years, though.
No, this is our first full year, it was January to January, was the first year in 24/7.
Okay, so you think the actual, where are we right now? Because we don't have an actual, I mean, I've got an actual for 217, right? I have 9,000.
Right.
So where are we at for 18, and can we annualize that?
Yeah, do we have a,
then, let's see. Well, what we did was we calculated, we went off what the chart said that we were supplied, and then we calculated the gallonage we used that we used last year for gallons.
The diesel fuel price is the most sensitive price in the Energy Administration's forecast model. It's supposed to go up 7.7% next year. So there's some of that is explained that way. Then it's your running the station 24/7.
And then, let's see, next was 5230, which is other utilities, which is basically our water bill.
Should we just hit the high ones, Chief?
Yeah.
Yeah, which one do you want
Repair
to hit?
maintenance.
Repair maintenance, 52,400.
Okay, let's see here.
it's
Okay.
doubled for this year and then added next.
52,400, which is,
Repair
yep,
maintenance.
20,000. So we did 15 last year. I believe we went over a little bit, so we bumped it up.
No, 15 this year is what you did. The year before was 2017 and you did 8,900 or 9,000, say. Then it went to 15, now you're looking for 20.
Ask respectfully, please.
Right?
I think it's a very fair
Yeah,
question.
I'm just trying to-
I'm concerned about.
I think he was looking
I
at the wrong
understand, I'm getting
column.
concerned about the tone of the
Oh, okay.
questions. I'm just saying, I think it's a very fair question, all I say.
No,
is ask
it's
a
a fair question.
Respectfully,
All I'm-
okay.
Quite honestly, I think we went over a little bit, so we just bumped it up a little bit last year. We had, what we did recently was to try and save money. repair-wise, was, we put in a lift over at the highway a year or two ago, and there was a mechanic hired, so we're trying to save money as far as oil changes, and there's certain things that he can do, and then there's certain things that we have to send out, okay?
I would think with the new truck, though, that.
Yeah, you have
cost
one
would
new
go
truck,
down.
but you still have some other trucks that are older and are beginning to cost more. One was also, you think about, you have not just engines, you also have pumps that you have to do. So, you know, one pump rebuilding a pump or repacking a pump, it's a $2,700 bill.
Okay. Could we go to 53,800 other services?
Yep.
Was
All right,
1710. that's-
other services is basically our, it's basically all of our service contracts. Some examples of our service contracts, we do septic pumping, all our software, our IMC software, we pay for it on the fire side and we pay for it on the EMS side. It's about about $5 grand on, it's, about $2,500, $3,000 each side.
No.
That's split between fire and ambulance.
Quick question.
Yep.
Chief. When I first came on finance, I believe we were signing a request for payment because the septic line was pitched improperly and it clogged. Is it still?
You know, that's a situation where it's sort of resolved itself. We haven't had an issue. We do have it pumped twice a year now, and we try to stay ahead of that. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know whether it was an issue where it was the toilet paper we were using, or, because we have changed vendors with it.
Who's Sherman?
We have changed vendors very recently, within the past year, as far as,
I don't wanna think about this.
which is, you're not the only one.
So what do we have for one more, 55,811, the uniforms, that's a change?
Yes, that was a change that was in other supplies, that always came out of other supplies. And it comes out of other supplies both on the fire side and the EMS side. It went up a little bit because we added staff, and each staff member contractually gets $1,000 in uniform services. Now, that was lumped into other supplies, but it wasn't really itemized, so I added that I itemized it so it would be easier to track, because it was in that pile of money, but it wasn't really being budgeted, because we were constantly cut. So I wanted to put that there, so that we can track it. Okay?
Anybody have any other questions on the fire?
I do.
Okay.
So Matt, this is actually for you, I think. So I've got a document, and I know I came in late, but I've got a document, a memo, right? And it's got the multiple lines, and I'm going to assume K. Morse draft is really just the selectmen draft, not an individual.
No, it's an individual. So the only
And personally?
milestones, we're jumping ahead, but the only milestones that have been documented and won't change are the FY 2018 budget,
Sure.
that's the existing
Sure,
one,
yep.
and the department head request,
Yep,
which is what they put in for.
yep, yep.
So what you've had then is only conversation pieces that have been floated, but no votes by anyone to lock in any assumptions.
The next column, K. Morse draft, is that coming out of an individual or a 5-person draft?
No, if it was 5 people, it would say Board of
That's
Selectmen
fine,
draft.
that's fine. That's
Because
my
the
question.
chairman was the only member to come to that meeting with a budget.
That's my question.
And then that became the discussion vehicle for the entire meeting. So to show you what it was we were all talking about that night, that's that column.
Okay. And TA 5-year, what's the TA part?
Town
That's
administrator.
me.
Got it.
So what
I catch on.
I do things a little bit differently than the chairman of the board does. He's only trying to balance the budget for 2019. I looked at the whole thing and said, I will make all the changes in the budget I need to balance the budget in 5 years, and I may have slightly different policy recommendations from the chairman. And the
Okay.
crux of that is steps and COLA on the town side.
So I guess my question for fire is I see the 018 budget, it's a dead-on number, 427 and change. And I see the chief's request, wish list of proposal, and it's the 553. Then I see the outline of where those changes are. And then I see the Morse draft and the TA proposal with a number somewhat in between. I mean, the 18 budget versus the 19 department head request is a good $125,000 apart. That Kevin and then adopted, proposed plan for next year from TA is the same number. Do you have identification of what you or Kevin recommended within the 125 delta that you thought, yes, this should go in, no, that shouldn't go in?
Yes.
Can you give us that idea?
So
please?
that, we took out all the medics. We added no new head count.
Okay, so,
As step one of reducing the department head's request.
and that does it almost entirely, right?
Yep.
So that the change here is you took out that one medic line and adopted everything else in his request?
That's right.
That's my question.
Yes.
Thank
Do
you.
we want to go through the ambulance quickly? Or are we ready to move along?
Let me just look at this tape.
Chief, can we do just 5 minutes on the ambulance?
Sure.
Walk us through the compensation, and we'll ask if anyone has any questions on the expenses.
Okay, so if you go back to the top of the ambulance, you see the other half of my salary. Then you see 3 full-time wages for firefighters and medics, EMTs, the 187,424. You have the other half of the clerk, which is 16,325. You have part-time wages, which is 10,000. And that was, part-time wages used to be like $70,000, so that came down. Well, obviously, basically we shifted a number up to full-time wages. And then we actually had like 35,000 in there because we didn't know what a first year was gonna cost us. So we cut that back to 10 this year.
Is there a person that's associated with that
No,
number?
no, there's not. There's not. It's basically to cover shifts when people are out on vacation and second ambulance calls that we can't, we don't have a crystal ball. So that is there. And then the last one, you have stipends again. And then the total of that is 290,494.
The overtime seemed to have peaked last year. We were running in the approximately 21,000 range. Peaked at 44 and then goes from 28 to 30 in the upcoming 5 years. Did that have to do with the added overnight shift?
Well, the 44 is a budget number.
Right.
So
Okay.
that's, and
Budgetary.
if you notice on this special town meeting, we don't have that in front of you, we actually have money budgeted into the ambulance salary line that we will be transferring out to cover fire and expense. So as Chief indicated, this was our first year with the 24/7,
Yep.
and when we added money at the fall town meeting, we did put it in here, but it probably won't be used for that.
So the actual will be closer to between 23
Yeah.
and 30,000. Okay, thank you.
So that's the 290,494.
Okay, does anyone have any questions on the expenses for the ambulance? Okay, great. Does anyone have any more questions in general for the chief?
I have a slight, this may sound like kind of a petty thing, it's a question that's kind of been bothering me. I have property here in Douglas and I go work on it. I can't get over with good water we have in Douglas. I just put the faucet on, you put it under there, there's no chlorine in it or anything. How come I see them all delivering water to these buildings, bottled water, when we have such fantastic water in town?
Well, I will tell you that the treasurer's finance department, we purchase our own. So it is
But I-
not
I
purchased
saw
by the town at
A whole
all.
truck out front the other day, so maybe they weren't delivering here one of those, they bring the big gallons.
Well,
in.
no, like Jean Lovett
Yeah.
has every third week, every third month that I pay for the water. It's just
Okay.
located centrally in our offices. And I know building department, they pay for their own as well. It is not paid for by the town.
You just drink by the town water, it's good
Uh,
stuff.
Maybe it's
I know,
laziness on the
Less
part.
contaminated than that.
Yeah, right, it's better for the environment. That's how
I'll
we
give
get
you a
our water
perfect
man
example
back
though.
there.
We buy water,
Yeah,
we buy it in cases,
yeah,
because we have to put it on the trucks.
Okay,
Because
I
we have to stay
understand.
hydrated at fires and we put it on the
Right.
ambulance and
I
things like
understand
that, so.
that, that's different, yeah.
That's.
Just
water's-
use the hose.
That was obvious, that was.
You laugh,
I was
but
like,
it-
they might get it out of his book.
you laugh, but at the fire academy, they actually have signs, this is not potable water, you
Yeah.
can't drink this water.
Right, right.
And they actually all get issued a water bottle, so.
Okay.
Thank you
Anything
very
else?
much,
Thank you,
Chief.
Chief. Appreciate it.
We'll find somebody else.
Next up is Bob Sullivan from the Water and Sewer.
This is not, no reflection of pioneer water.
That was your onset.
I'm not easily insulted, and I was gonna speak up if the chief didn't. So I can't claim it's potable once I put it in the fire. Sorry I didn't get these to you guys ahead of time, but
Oh, you watched last night's meeting,
I
did you?
say my commissioners decided to beat me up on the budget this year, so I ended up having another meeting with them to try to get to the numbers they were looking for.
My apologies for running behind. We're calling
I
it.
did. You're welcome.
That's all right. If we had a glass ball, I would have known I didn't have to try to increase the police department's revenues on the way here.
It's a coming. Probably one for water, one for sewer, that'd be like
Yeah, you
this.
should have.
How long have you been here now, Bob? 9 years? A long time, huh? You've gone a little gray. Puzzle over there.
Looks like
You don't
this,
have one under that?
looks like it's a 3-page.
3 pages, double-sided.
Oh, okay. I need that. I got one.
You're gonna mess everybody up.
Together you got three.
Okay.
They were here like last night. They were here like last night, so.
Hold the corners over.
I would like going colorized, laminated, and bound, please.
Go join the finance committee of Boston.
No, I just have to have somebody in BVT, or a concept.
Or BBT,
We're
yes.
gonna finish the senior citizen project before we can do anything else.
All right, Bob, why don't you walk us through the budget, please? We start, I guess page 1 is the sewer.
Are we not supposed to have three?
Yeah, page 1 is 2, yeah.
3 pages.
Double-sided.
Are they numbered? 1, 2
Well,
on
he
the
asked me
back?
how many, and
Does he need that, does he?
You want one? I'll get you, I'll make a copy.
No, I don't know.
There should have been extra. I counted.
That's the residue.
It's some clearly lost pages over here, so.
There you go.
No, the residual, as we learned last
Residue,
night.
yeah.
Water department is residue.
Okay, let's roll.
There isn't really a whole lot of changes over last year. I mean, we went with it was 1.5 on the COLA. And I'm not sure if you did the steps or not.
That would be voted on probably later this week.
Yeah, so I didn't hear anything on that, so I just budgeted for it now. We can adjust it if it comes in with those steps.
If I could just remind the new members, the water sewer department is an enterprise fund, so it's a little different than other town departments. So any money that they don't use actually gets certified and part of their retained earnings, so they don't, if they budget over, and for instance, if the steps don't, are not voted, then the money would stay within that enterprise fund. It wouldn't be closed into the general fund like the other departments would be.
And the revenue is from
Right,
users.
Use,
Yes.
right.
right. The taxpayers are not
We have-
paying for
yeah.
the water department. The people who use the water and sewer are paying for it.
Right, we fund our own budget essentially.
We help with the debt a little bit.
Yes. All right, so the salaries were based on a 1.5% COLA and steps for those that are available. health insurance. and the
What's your
purchase.
number of employees down there, Bob? Might start with that.
Well, I'm short-staffed, and I think I may have had 6 months in my 9 years that I was actually fully staffed.
Yeah. I know.
It seems like when I finally replace, I lose another. Yeah, I mean, by law, we're required to have 2 on the sewer, 2 on the water.
Got mandates with that too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm short 1 in the water, and I'm short the part-time person that had to do miscellaneous stuff.
Okay, so that means you have how
So I
many?
have 2 on sewer, 1 on water, and then an admin at the moment.
So you're short because you're looking to fill those positions?
Correct. And it's very tough these days because the positions, I mean, everybody's having a hard time finding operators. So of course, that's driving the price up, and
Right.
for what we offer, it makes it difficult to get people in.
Okay.
So that's helped pay for some of our capital projects that we did over the past few years.
Okay, walking through just the highlights on the expenses?
Let's see, highlights that was the main point that the commissioners beat me up on, they wanted it level funded.
Okay.
So if you look at the expenses, if you go to the end number, it's level funded on the expense side from last year's. So that's where they had me make the cuts from my proposed budget. So they beat me up before you guys got to see it, so should make it fair.
But your health insurance went up $12,000.
The health insurance, I don't have any control over,
Yeah, I know, I know.
so,
So you had to pull it from someplace else then?
exactly.
Okay.
And I tried to explain that to them, but they said the town's having trouble everywhere, so we're not gonna go up it.
Didn't you guys raise your rates just in the past year?
I think it was
Not so-
2 years.
2 years ago?
Yeah.
Time flies over here. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on any of
That's the sewer.
any other sewer expenses or encumbrances? Okay, moving on to the water department.
Same on the water department, it's 1.5 on the COLA. And they, again, wanted it level funded on the expenses.
Okay.
Got it? Yeah.
So if you went to the very end, overall in the budget, it went up from last year 0.67%.
Beautiful. We love it.
So I guess that's about as quick of a summary as I can do.
Excellent.
Anyone have any other questions?
Capital project?
Capital, as in the capital projects that,
Any projects coming up?
we always have things that we're looking at. It's a matter of what we can fund or what we cannot. We do put forth projects under the capital committee. I don't know where they ended up with that, if they have made their recommendations yet.
No,
So we have,
meeting tomorrow.
we have several on the capital committee's list. I already presented to them, so I think there was 4 overall that we looked at that were ones that we see as priorities that, we're just waiting to hear what they say.
Do you have any plans for the mobile land that we looked at?
The mobile, the land itself is more or less, the idea of that was to protect the watershed. So there's also a stipulation in there that you can't do anything with the land for, it was a 10-year period from when mobile owned it. So those options will be up for discussion after we get past that 10-year period.
The buildings on there?
The building, we're using for, it was already set up basically for a pipeline, so all our supplies, the pipes and everything we used on that section there. The office building part, we haven't done anything with other than going to make sure nothing was falling apart, but
Does that land abut the,
landfill,
does it abut the West Street
Yes.
property?
pump station, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And does it above the landfill too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it goes up to the line.
Nice land, yeah.
Yeah, it's big.
So you get a little bit of use out of those buildings as well, it's good.
Yeah, the garage building we've already pretty much filled.
Okay, any other questions on the water and sewer?
So your capital projects, you're funding out of your receipts reserved or out of your
Retained
retained
earnings.
earnings or,
The ones that we have done,
yeah,
yes, those have all been funded with no loans.
well, yeah, except for the big one. So the ones that you put into the capital, how is that working for approval and funding? The funding source would still go back to the sewer.
All capital requests in excess of 10,000, regardless of funding
Yep.
source, is
Should-
presented
for
to
the
the
town.
capital committee.
Yeah, okay,
The funding source is listed as one of the items.
yeah. Good.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanna, we are gonna do, is there anybody in the audience, I know the library folk are here. We are running behind tonight, so what I would ask you guys, I don't know if you guys wanna come on April 9th, which is Monday, April 9th, that's our second and last meeting, our meeting before the public hearing. You guys want, because when we talked, we didn't talk much about cutting the library, so if you guys wanna come at 7 o'clock, we'd be happy to give you 30 minutes to give us your pitch.
I think we just scheduled a trustee meeting for April 9th at 7 o'clock.
Well, we'd have everybody here, wouldn't we?
You guys wanna come at,
Okay, all right, let's do it.
yeah, or you wanna come at 8 o'clock, whatever's convenient for you.
So, let's be up first, sure.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right, great.
What, do you want us to present then, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've seen your budget, but kind of what I would like to see, and maybe the other members can speak up as well, is maybe a presentation on the value of the library to the town, what you see the library becoming the next 5.
I mean, I know it wasn't, oh, it's not on our agenda,
It's
so
not
we
on the
probably should.
agenda. We probably have at least another 30 minutes of
We do?
general budget discussion. And Matt has
Okay.
this
Yep,
presentation we
okay,
want to talk
that's right.
about, so I'm happy to stay, but I was trying to
Yeah.
judge the committee after we were here 3.5 hours last night, so.
Yeah.
They're all here.
They're here, I
I
think,
wouldn't
to see
mind
they come out.
a 5 or 10 minute,
Yeah, I think.
You know what, you
discussion.
can, let us come on the,
Is that better?
meeting in the night, because we're gonna have a meeting there. I'll have everybody back here, and we can start as first thing when you guys are fresh. All right,
and we
Okay.
may know more things by then.
yes, we may know more things by then, yes.
All right.
Okay,
Well,
Thank
we just-
you.
We just
All
kind
right,
of
not
felt
a
seeing you
problem.
were here, but, okay,
that's okay,
Keep
we
in
got a
mind
meeting
that
tonight
we
too.
felt
All right.
pity.
Okay.
okay.
Could you, could you, and maybe I'm way out of line here, but could you guys, for that night, be prepared to address maybe, and I know it's a scary word, but kind of the most skeletal way the library could be run and stay open?
That's
Okay.
why we scheduled the meeting for April 9th.
Yeah,
Fair
Is
enough.
to
okay.
discuss a
Yeah.
contingency budget
Yeah.
with no municipal appropriation.
Okay,
It's not pretty.
no, I
Okay.
get it, I get
It's
it.
not pretty.
We
Got it.
keep it open 30 minutes a week.
Yeah.
I would have voted 10 years ago to bring in the outside money and get it done.
Yeah.
Library's a great asset. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank
guys.
you. You guys just here to watch us, you don't have anything you want
Oh,
to say?
I love watching you, but no, I just like the library experience.
Okay, all right, great,
It's
thank
a
you very
great
much.
answer.
I'm gonna stay because I learned things.
Go ahead.
Chief Vincent last night.
Yeah. Okay, so Matt has given out the 4-page memo which Howard referred to during the fire chief presentation with both fiscal 2018 budget, department head requests, Mr. Morse, the board of selectmen chairman, his draft, the town administrator's 5-year plan number for 2019, and then with the override. Now, this override number Matt, have the Board of Selectmen's input as well, or is this your kind of crack at it?
I disclosed all the assumptions that I made in the meeting
Okay,
at some great length. Because that's the purpose of scenario modeling, would be if you were to do something the town has not been willing to do to date, you ought to be able, in my opinion, to elaborate a plan that addresses the concerns of those departments and those groups in the community that feel like an override would be justified. And at the same time, identify the management flexibility and some of the management principles that are necessary to run a municipal government for the medium to long term in a stable fashion, without relying upon uncertainties as your rescue. So we cannot predict with any certainty at all whether or not there will be any free cash available from one year to the next. And so if you're always looking to free cash to supplement your revenue budget to get you to balance, you could very quickly get to the point where you don't have that money, and when the number that you've been plugging in is 500,000 or 600,000, that's a scary possibility. So the idea of choosing a value for a potential override and plugging it into the budget is what could you do with that, and what would you, most importantly, what would you not do with that? And that's one of the reasons why I produced this for public discussion, is that you'll notice that even in the override scenario, we don't expect to plug any of those funds into the municipal budget. And we've gone from 0 headcount increase under our austerity budget to only 1 person in 5 years. Somebody that, in my judgment, we desperately need for fiscal '20, which would be a facilities manager, someone to grab a hold of all the projects we have in our many different buildings and really have a plan, have some procurement experience, some design background perhaps, so that we can take Mr. Furno, put him back into his highway role, because he wears so many hats. He would still have his highway role and his volunteer fire captain role. He'd still be giving a lot to the town. But right now, we're taking away from all that. We've got him running around the buildings. We've had so many little crises here in town hall with a flood in the basement, a sewer backup in the basement, any number of leaks in the roof, and then all the snowstorms coming here and clearing out the walkways and all the rest of it. It's a full-time commitment. So on the town side, and I just think it's very important, people will say, where does all the money go? Well, where would you slate all the money to go? It wouldn't go to the town side. It would go to the schools to bring them from a proposed cut, to a 1% increase, which is a little bit more along the lines of what Mr. Argall in his most recent email to everyone said. That's kind of what we were all thinking was sustainable. So it's not a randomly chosen value on my part, it's what did they expect to have to make the decisions they made this summer around positions to backfill sustainable for them in a way that's sustainable for the town. So it's such a large number that if you increase it 1% a year for 5 years, it grows about $130,000, $140,000 a year. Which, if you do that over 5 years, it's almost a $500,000 increase. So that's just to eat up your override figure. And then the rest would be take free cash out of the dynamic of the budget so that you can balance your budget every year without using free cash. But then if you do have free cash, and you would hope you would, it goes for what it should go for, which is capital and OPEB and stabilization and the things that give the community its long-term viability. We can do a lot with $500,000, $600,000 a year of capital purchases. It still doesn't necessarily get you to where you need to go. So what are the total requests for capital this year? Are over $19 million. So if you split that out over 10 years, that's 1.9 million a year. You're not gonna get that. So take out the big item, which is a request for a police building. You're still at 11 million. You still need to find $1.1 million a year to stay on a capital replacement cycle that is responsible. Capital will eat you alive the day you wake up after you've cut your budget and there's no additional revenue. Then you wake up one day, the fire engine doesn't work, and the ambulance doesn't work, and none of the dump trucks can sally out in the snowstorm because they all have, you know, blown out chassis. The day that hits you, you may not do an override, but you may end up doing debt exclusions or capital exclusions to the point where tax rate's gonna be high anyway. The best way to run municipal government is stability and predictability over a long period of time, with modest increases in each of those lines, and a plan that you can identify and tell people exactly, we need 500,000 this year, next year, next year, next year, but you're gonna replace things on time so that they don't generate downtime, repairs and maintenance, liability risks, all the unmanageable, unknowable things that eventually really can hurt a community. The only the interesting parallel for me looking at, it gives me a chance to take a swipe at Dr. Fitzpatrick, who's not here to defend himself, but he sort of misspoke last night. He said the reason why his budget was going up 4.74% is because he has things in his budget that the Douglas Public Schools don't. Well, that's silliness. That doesn't make any sense. Think about it. He had those things last year. He had those things the year before. So something's growing to make it 4.74%. You could also take his logic and flip it around and say, well, if the town of Douglas has those things on our municipal budget and we have our school budget, by his logic, we should be asking for a 4.74% increase in the town of Douglas. Well, that's unheard of. If you go back and see that glossy document he passed out last night, what's driving his increase? Health insurance, pension, special ed, school transportation, and salaries are all over the 4.74%. He cut a bunch of other things to try to pull that number down, but it's health insurance by 12.5% year over year. So on that level, we're killing him. We're at 5.9%. Because why? Because the town of Douglas has budget discipline that he doesn't have. We don't just walk up to somebody and present them with a bill. We have to cut benefits or shave benefits to our employees. The retirement side, the retired employee from BVT is paying 10% or 15%, which was it, 10%?
I think there was.
Of premium. On our side, they pay 50% of premium. So we're already a better run organization than BVT from a long shot. Don't need to apologize to him or kowtow to him for any reason. He doesn't have that budget discipline. Only the 13 communities that pay into his budget can force him to make changes in health insurance and other things that he does to get that increase down. But I thought the parallels, I like it because it supports a point I'm making, which is we don't control the reason why these expenses are growing so rapidly. Health insurance and pension costs are not something we can easily attack at this point. And that's what drives the red numbers on the budget sheet. But I thought it was somewhat illustrative. The other thing I thought that was kind of important coming out of this was, in many cases, even in the override scenario, we're actually down from the fiscal 18 budget. We've just found some things we're going to do more efficiently or less of on the town side. Even if those resources were available, they need to go somewhere else.
Matthew, can you walk us through briefly the override scenario as it stands now and how it will play out, how it will play forward?
So how the funds would be used?
No, just where we are, where it is in terms of, is it already approved that we're going to put it on a ballot?
Well,
We just don't know those things now.
yeah, so Thursday night, the Board of Selectmen will meet. They agreed in principle at their last meeting on a 5-0 vote to put it on the election ballot. Technically, they need to take 2 very specific votes, and we've given them the exact wording from legal counsel. Shall the town, approve, and there's all the language for both municipal and school uses. They need to vote first to put it on the warrant, and then they need to vote to put it on the ballot. They take two separate votes.
This coming Thursday
This
is
coming
anticipated.
Thursday would be the earliest they could do it.
Okay.
The last possible time they could do it, I think, would be April 3rd, the night they sign the warrant.
And then refresh my memory so that getting it on the warrant gets it on the May 10th or whatever.
So the town meeting is May 7th,
Thank you.
And the 8th would be the election.
and the election is on the 8th. So it will be bang, bang, it'll be the night before and the following.
And it would have to be approved by a majority, a simple majority in each scenario?
But it has to pass both.
Right. And again, it's a 1.5 million one-year event?
No, it's forever.
Or recurring event?
It comes into
Raises
the
the
base.
base. It raises the
The
base.
override is forever.
1.5 million more, across the board
Every
tax-wise.
year,
Okay.
forever.
And what was the last time we went at this? Were we 2.3 or something a couple years ago?
It was 1.7 was the last one. We did 1.5 for the school, and we had it at 200,000 for the extraordinary maintenance account.
And what was that? Did that lose right at town meeting? That didn't even get
No,
to
it
that?
No,
typically
They
passes
pass
at
the town meeting, they fail at the ballot, that's
Right.
typically what happens.
Because people pack the town meeting, but then people come out and vote on the ballot, and that's when it does.
And how close was it on the ballot?
2 to 1.
2 to 1? Yeah, right. I remember somewhere it wasn't
The
close.
first time around, it was 4 to 1.
4 or 5 years ago, right?
Yeah.
5, 6 years ago.
4-1, it was the people out, you know that.
So has there ever been any discussion at Board of Selectmen of reducing the number, the ask? 700,000, 800,000?
I can show you what that does. I think the reason why there's reluctance to do that is they don't want to have to come back ever again. Because so when I run that scenario, so this last scenario, right, is only for fiscal 19, I have a
Yeah.
point.
Yeah,
It gets you a pretty good surplus, which would go into free cash,
Yeah.
your capital
Yeah.
budget.
Yeah.
But by year 5, you have deficit again.
and I'm just saying there are two approaches.
Yeah.
To lose 6 times in a row because you ask too much, or get a little today, and a little more 3 years from now, when each increment looks just tasty enough to eat.
Yeah, and I've got I'm your administrator, not your mayor. So
Yeah,
I
yeah, I
only
get it.
can
Yeah, I get it.
implement the policies that people that come to a town meeting, and I don't want to get too deep into electioneering or suggesting one number over. You give me a number, I'll show you what it does to the budget
Yeah.
and the decisions we make to make that budget balance. And so if you look at the spreadsheet Matt sent, which,
This one?
no, the spreadsheet we sent a couple of weeks ago, where you can play with the numbers. So this starts with the basis, it includes the chief medic, it includes the
Those are fuzzy
library,
numbers.
includes
numbers.
shush. Fuzzy.
Yeah.
It includes the school's request of 3.5%. That gets us to 900, we have a deficit of 900.
Well, I can see already. I
Well,
just found the 1.5 in here, at about 4 lines.
But are you saying, Matt, if we even get the $1.5 million override, in 5 years we're gonna be back in a deficit again?
You would begin to use free cash again to balance the budget. Now, it would be 150, 200.
Yeah.
My personal view of municipal finance is that we should be doing our job, which is to reduce expenses every year
Yeah.
and to conservatively budget revenues. Because with all the potential on revenue should be upside potential. So if you generate a little extra free cash to the tune of 200,000 for a budget this size, what is that? That's what we saved or what the taxpayer overpaid. Give it back to them, but to use it to reduce the budget. But once you start to get to where you are now, which is 500, 600,000, that's your capital budget. You're just spending your future to make today's budget work.
Is there any reason to believe that this override vote will be any different than the last one?
I won't talk about myself, but I'll talk in a complimentary fashion to the superintendent of schools. I think he has definitely demonstrated last night that he has a plan to compete and try to win. And he's identified the variables that will make his school stronger. We've also, I think, advanced the conversation. I wasn't here, but your school choice in and school choice out numbers are as much a Russian roulette game as you dare to play. And if it goes on long enough where the school's position deteriorates, it's gonna come back on our side of the budget. It'll be the library this year, it'll be other public services
But the
next year.
flip is also true, as we
Yes.
spent a lot of time on last night.
Right.
If you curb that $500,000 difference and start heading back in the other direction, it starts to flow money back.
Right,
To
and
the
that would
extent
be,
Superintendent Main's program starts to get effective in the next couple of years and get some traction,
Right.
that can reverse a little of that.
Which in my view is why you don't give him 3% every year for the forecast. You give him the 1%, because if he stabilizes his operation, he'll get something on the other
Yeah, you
side.
bet.
The only thing the town could put itself on the hook for is their capital, right?
Yep, yep,
To
yep.
alleviate that pressure on their reserves.
So the debt exclusion that we overrode last year, right, how many years was that?
Trucks,
That's just a
we
big-
did,
5 years.
we did
5
not,
or 7.
we did not, we did not borrow for the trucks because we used the.
Oh, that's right, we ended up not
Right.
doing, using it.
Right.
Okay.
I was thinking that we were
You
gonna
know,
have something.
there's been some highly publicized override success stories. I think one of them was in Arlington
I've heard you can't compare Boston.
a while ago. This is a suburb of Boston.
So is
I got it right
There's a
away,
whole hour to
Got it
it.
right away.
I've just heard that.
Belmont.
somewhere.
Yeah.
At any rate,
Yeah.
it was highly successful. How
They
the
have
man,
gobs more money
I
per
understand that,
person.
I understand that.
Yeah.
However, they needed an override,
No, I get it.
and this was a number of years ago.
But every
and-
town person has money falling out of their pockets.
At any rate,
You've got
Howard,
disposable income.
if I
I was just saying,
may
go ahead, I'm sorry.
finish,
My apologies.
it was a 5-year plan. 5 years, when you're budgeting, as we all know, is about as far you can look out. You can't look out much further than that. You know, the numbers get less and less stable and less, you know, so you can count on them. But it was a 5-year plan, and they voted it. They promised the homeowners, we're not coming back for 5 years. We'll leave you alone. Now, there are some people who say, oh, you're just gonna come back in 5 years. Well, that may be true, but that's the cost of living, people. That's the cost of running a community. I mean, if you multiply it out, $1.5 million on a, what's our budget, 30? It's not a lot. So, I mean, I think I'm seeing more and more support out there for this attempt. And I think a lot of people want Douglas to remain a viable place to live and bring up their children.
It's gotta be affordable.
But it's gotta be affordable, I know.
And that's, you know,
It's
I know.
$400 on an average, or $450 on an average house.
To you and I, that might not be a lot, but
Right.
there
Some
are
people,
individuals
I
out there
agree.
on a fixed income,
I agree.
retirees.
We're on a
or-
fixed income.
It was the same amount 2 years ago. It didn't pass that.
Yeah,
No,
that's-
I understand.
To Pam's point, just,
Economy's a bit better now.
economy's a little better. Using Facebook, you
Yeah.
know, is a dangerous way of going about things, but just reading Dynamic Douglas over the last 5 or 6 days, it's definitely a more balanced, an even amount of opinions on both sides. And I do think there's an understanding in the community that we're heading down the wrong path. And if we don't do something, it's gonna change. Now, there may be some whose personal situations don't allow us to make that change, but I think they see the library as definitely a real possibility of leaving. And we've seen a little bit of the problems with the schools and BBT, some of that stuff we talked about 2 or 3 years ago has come to fruition and affected our community. So whether it's gonna pass or not, I don't know. But I do think there is a greater understanding in the community of what the needs are and how we get there. I'm not sure there's obviously not an agreement on, but
You know, I reflect on my childhood being surrounded by small dairy farmers and how they all eventually met their demise. Was not because they went out and bought big fancy John Deere tractors or because they were in any way inept at what they did. They were all brilliant at what they did. It was death by 1,000 good decisions. So, you know, we couldn't afford grain this winter, so we used more silage out of the silo, and then, you know, the cows weren't giving as much milk as they were when they had the grain, so my revenue went down. So what did I do? I reduced my herd so I could make my food last through the winter. Now my herd's not 100 anymore, it's 80, and before you know it, you know, the bottom fell out. It was $14 a hundredweight, and nobody could make money, and that was the end of it. It was all developed into real estate. That's just
Growth.
municipal government can work the same way. You can make lots of really intelligent budget cuts. You can work smarter every single year.
Growth.
At the end of the day, you poke your head above the hole and you realize the community we thought we were building doesn't exist anymore. If you think about the things you already don't have, you don't have a school-funded sports program, you don't have a rec program.
But every successful business model works off growth rather than cuts. Cuts are the death knell, the dairy farmer. And so you've got to grow and expand and buy out another dairy farm. And you know, we've got all these schools with all this capacity. We talked about that.
The
Growing revenue.
I thought it was
By the way, the
your idea
Facebook.
was a brilliant idea last night from Mr. Hutnick. Was that center of excellence idea really does have legs. Somebody's got to flesh that out, because if a town like this spent, instead of trying to offer every AP course under the sun, so we're going to offer microbiology, biology, chemistry, and then you know, some other medical. And if you're a kid who wants to be in the sciences and go that direction, get on your bus in Sutton and come to Douglas.
Right.
And they can do engineering. That way, everybody's head count
Get
is
those economies of scale where we can partner together and take advantage of.
Blast the
opportunities
offerings
that
for
are
the
out there.
kiddos.
Right.
We need a good visionary town administrator to put that plan.
No, I think it's your
You
superintendent.
get me in
I
the
think
schools.
he deserves the support, because the
Yep.
plan he's got is
I was-
based upon his experience and insight, will work if it's invested in.
By the way, you talk about Facebook, I want to give him credit. All of that was on Facebook today, and I don't read it, but I've heard from others that he put all those numbers that we saw last night. You know, rather than put it on the fire chief's board like an old person would do, he used a younger venue of Facebook, and it's out there publishing, and that's great.
I believe we were on Facebook Live for the first 2 hours
Yeah.
until the guy's phone ran out.
Yeah,
Mr. Fontaine.
so.
So where did you find that stuff on Facebook?
It's a Facebook
The
page.
town page. Well, not the town page, but.
Town gossip page.
Yeah, right?
Oh, yeah,
Is
how
this-
work
is
finds
it-
it.
It has the
The town
Twitter.
crier.
Yeah,
Is that the Douglas thing on Douglas?
yeah, it's, I mean, in a way, it's replaced the weekly town newspaper, you know, what's
It's
Oh,
going on.
moderated by Donna and Kevin, right?
If I find it, I'll let you know.
I don't know who, I'm actually not, my wife's a member, I'm actually not a
Really
member.
good idea.
I heard you had to be accepted.
You do.
You do.
You do, you have to.
But everybody, if you're from town.
If you're from town or
they'll
used to live in town.
I think I
So,
tried to get it sent.
To finish answering the question,
Sure.
what else is gonna happen Thursday? We really need the board to decide what that budget's gonna be. It's gonna appear on the warrant. So,
The override pitch.
no, what is the basic budget? What is the, so call it the austerity budget with no additional revenue at all.
Got it.
What is it you're gonna do? They need to finalize those numbers.
Mhm.
So it'll be a real number in one of these columns.
Right.
And then they need to also vote the contingent budget, which would be, were the
Yeah.
override to pass, what accounts would be
And
increased.
show people both.
And show, they have to show people both.
Okay.
So that, it's kind of an important meeting, because I don't anticipate it being a short one.
I was
So
just
that's
gonna
the
say-
Board of Selectmen's
nap tomorrow.
recommendation.
Right, so on the flyer, we're gonna have 4 budgets if the Board of Selectmen and the Finance do not agree. Is
Right.
that correct? You
We'll
would
have 3.
Finance, no override, finance
No,
override.
no, the override piece should be a contingent article.
Yeah.
So it would be the base budget
Should be
as
the
one
finance
article and the
budget.
supplemental budget to be contingent on the override passing.
And we would just be voting on the regular budget.
The first article will be just the regular budget, the second article will be a contingent article.
So,
Similar to what we did back in going into
so,
17.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, there's such, I mean, I guess it'd be, so when you say a contingent budget, would that be the whole budget again, or just the changes from the?
Just the changes.
Just the changes, okay. The other question I have is, if this body or the board decides not to fully recommend to fund BBT, we did that 2 or 3 years ago.
2 years.
We ran into this trouble at town meeting that Rich Bowen said BBT's budget had to, it was already in the flyer because the Board of Selectmen voted, recommended. We did not, the Board of Selectmen did. But then we got to town meeting and there was a hubbub, Pam may have more details than I do, that Dr. Fitzpatrick's budget had to be up there.
That had to do with the moderator.
They had the right to present the budget.
And that is just, it's just not true. The ruling by the moderator stands though, unless you challenge it.
So it's not Rich who
And I
was
chose not
pushing
to. No,
that.
it was not.
Okay.
No, I'm confused though by what you're saying.
Okay.
Maybe it's
Doc-
because I'm so
No, I
rabid
didn't,
that I
I
think
tend
this
not
town
to
should
explain
vote this
things
budget
slowly.
down.
All right, Pam. Pam was the chairwoman. of the planning
Dr.
board.
Fitzpatrick contends that the finance committee did not recommend his budget that year. And so he got to town meeting and he spoke to the moderator, I'm sure. And I think Rich Bowen did have something to do with
I
it.
thought Rich ruled that it was, the Mass State law said that
No.
we had to present, Dr. Fitzpatrick's budget needed to be presented at the town meeting. We had to be the one to present it at the town meeting.
And Dr. Fitzpatrick's budget was presented in the column that had a request. So it was there, it was in print. Finance Committee's recommendation, however, that the Finance Committee's main job is to recommend to town meeting with their recommendations for the budget. We recommended a different number. And it was, the contention was that we had to recommend Dr. Fitzpatrick's number. And
not-
that's when I
not
ref-
My recollection.
Oh, it isn't, okay.
That's how I remember it,
So
like you're saying.
I
They
understood
said
it as two different things.
I mean,
That-
the moderator
that-
told me to recommend that other number. I refused. I mean, I remember standing there doing that.
Yeah, the finance recommendation did not include the additional assessment.
Right,
That was the difference
Yeah.
between the two budgets.
Right.
So those are the columns, actually. That was the column they excluded from the recommendation.
But the budget
My
that went
memory is the town of Douglas voted down his budget request. Whether it was line item or, but it voted, at town meeting, it voted it down.
right.
The larger issue was, nonetheless, we were still gonna have to go back and backfill it, because once 9 towns approved it,
Yeah.
the contract required that we pay for it.
That, okay,
Right.
that is what happened, but that's not
That was
really
the
what
ultimate.
I'm
Maybe,
referring.
yeah.
I'm trying to prevent it was fairly
Chaos.
chaotic.
Chaos. And that year I had to
Right.
leave, go get my
Pam
husband.
ended up refusing, which I may have done as well,
Yeah.
and one of the selectmen ended up
Yeah.
presenting the budget.
Yep.
And it made the whole issue a little more complicated
Yep.
than it was. So I thought Rich generated it, maybe I didn't.
Well, all you're saying is we ought to clarify
Yes.
now, we have
Yeah.
plenty
Right.
of
Yeah.
time,
Right,
Yeah.
how to go about doing that.
correct.
Right.
And whether it gets effect or not, there's a time and a place to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
Right, and I was just for town meeting.
I did say I wasn't gonna election year, but if there's only one thing I'd see it come out of this would be to vote his budget down.
Well, last year we didn't. Last year we had a
No, we
split
just
vote.
capitulated.
We didn't have any
Some of
fight
us
last
But
year.
I guess he's
Someone
looking to
said
vote
that's
the
right.
budget down and just
Someone said
looking to
fight.
reduce it by the additional assessment, which is bringing it, I mean, because you do have,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a-
Yeah,
But it's
we're
just
probably a
question
week
of-
or so away from
It's
deciding
a
what we're
question
gonna
of
do.
one
Maybe
town
it's-
voting it down and looking to see if you can get 4 other towns to vote it down. But you've still gotta have, be the one if you're gonna be. But to Ryan's point then, somehow we've gotta know if, only if, what would that be, April 10th? If the finance committee votes to not recommend it, how that gets presented, both the recommendation, the negative recommendation, but also how the warrant then would say that line item? Is that the issue?
The warrant or the flyer was correctly done, but when we went to present it in front of the town meeting, that's where the issue was, in terms of we were changing the screen, and it was.
How would you propose we?
Well, there was a Dr. Fitzpatrick had a conversation with the moderator, and that's when the decision was made that in fact, his number needed to be presented.
And you don't think that's
And-
accurate?
No, it's not.
How do we correct that?
Well-
It sounds like someone needs to have a conversation with Rich, I can have a conversation with the moderator, and once we go down that road, if that's okay. Can we talk a little bit about how we're gonna proceed here? Let's talk a little bit about what has happened in the past, and what has happened in the future, what may happen in the future. So in the past, the town administrator, with approval from the Board of Selectmen, has presented a budget, and then we have, the night of the public meeting, made any amendments to that budget. Is that how we want to continue again? Do we want to take the time to create our own budget from scratch? As Matt has come in, he has definitely pushed more of the responsibility for the budget onto the Board of Selectmen that Mike has. Do we also want to take the responsibility, or are we happy just amending whatever the Board of Selectmen sends us on the warrant?
So what do you say, we should take this budget and start cutting it so we can meet what we have to meet?
So what I'm saying is, previously how we've done it the last 5 years is we've taken the town administrator sets Board of Selectmen budget,
Right.
and on the night of the public hearing, we make any changes.
Which is very confusing.
Yeah.
I hate doing things that same night in that back room.
It
No,
is
no.
tough,
It is
because
so
the public,
bad.
the public hearing is supposed to be giving the finance committee input so that we can then make our recommendations. That's what the but with it being at the, where it is time-wise,
Minutes.
No, you're talking about two different things.
Yeah, you're talking about town meeting, we're talking about.
We're talking about the 6:30 meeting, the night of
You're
town
talking about
meeting,
the,
right?
yeah.
Oh,
You're
you
talking
are?
about the April
That's
10th.
a-
I'm
Yes.
sorry,
No, you and I were on the same page.
I was on the different page.
All right.
She was on, which is fine, that's why I'm just trying to get all this clear. So, I mean, technically, we have 3 meetings left scheduled, with one on the 11th if we absolutely need. We have one next Tuesday with the Board of Selectmen, right? So, I did ask Mr. Morris what he wanted us to talk about. I said I did not, we were a little behind. I don't think we would be able to necessarily talk about the group's opinion specifically on budget items. He said he wanted to talk more generally on how the $1.5 million override would be spent, and get our thoughts on that. So that is kind of what is on the table for Tuesday night at 7.
See, I think you kind of have to have, okay, what's the budget if this thing doesn't go over? You got to have that one. And then, if it does, this is what it's gonna be. Because what are you gonna do? If you don't have the money, you don't have the money. So there's still gonna have to be cuts made somewhere if this thing doesn't pass.
Correct. We're going to put a budget, a non-override budget together, or recommend a non-override budget, and we will recommend the additional, what that additional revenue, how we would recommend we spend that as a supplement.
Right. We don't have much time to get that together, do we?
no.
Well, we've never, that's what I'm trying to get a sense of, we've never really done, we've just kind of always taken the Board of Selectmen budget and gone. I mean,
Right.
I remember the night of the first override, right? This was my first year on the committee, my head was spinning. And we had this big override vote, and in all 10 meetings, we spent like 7 minutes total talking about the override, and then we voted. And I was, wow, how that's done that? It seems to me, we had, that same night, we had spent 15 minutes. Pam had found some wording in one of the articles she didn't quite like, and we went back and forth for about 15 minutes. And we talked about this big override in town. It was like 7 minutes. Bam, bam, we voted, we were done. I was like, wow. So I'm trying to, I don't know if that's how we want to do it.
You're looking at process.
Yeah, I'm trying, so we have 3 meetings left, and we have probably no more time tonight. So do we want to use the meeting time after the 9th to talk about the override. Would the warrant be ready on the 3rd, I'm sorry? On the 3rd, would the warrant be ready by the 3rd?
Well, again, if we meet the definition of victory for Thursday,
How about
then
the non,
we would come back into the office on Friday morning, able to circulate what the board had established as their budget.
how about the non-budget portion of the warrant? Would that be ready for our discussion? The motions, you know, Articles
The other
10
thing.
through 20.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're,
So we gotta talk about that as
Oh, yeah,
well.
we need
that's
that
been
ASAP.
out for over a
Well,
week now.
we don't have the motions written.
No, the motion's
Okay.
written.
But if you have
We have the
Ryan
warrant.
should at least get a copy of
Yeah.
the warrant.
There's a draft warrant
Draft
on
warrant.
the desk in there.
There
Okay.
you
You
go.
can take it if you want.
And get
I
that
think
part
we
of
have
it
to
done.
add the two articles, the supplemental, and we had to talk about the transfer to stabilization article.
Yeah.
So the whole finance committee should get a copy of that so we can look at it, because we'll be able to generate questions or
I think
whatever.
after Thursday night, that,
Okay, so is that something we could discuss on Tuesday after we met with the board? Maybe we could get another room and we could go get that kind of out of the way, discussion out of the way. We could even vote, or maybe we could vote. You know, part of the problem is I do think the public hearing is gonna be fairly contentious with a lot of input from the public and likely to be 2+ hours and just, maybe not, I don't know.
Cut it and just keep it down.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's important.
It is.
Can I
Yep.
go back a little bit?
Sure.
I missed, you said a statement that I wasn't clear on.
Yep.
You said the non-budget part of the warrant.
Well, they're all.
What are non-budget parts of the warrant?
Were we gonna purchase, the last time around, we were gonna purchase the ExxonMobil land was a budget
Mhm.
item.
Yeah,
All the articles.
General
Make something a
bylaws.
street, yeah, make something a street, you know,
I mean,
things
you
like that,
could- you
that
could
really don't
talk
have anything
about-
to
I
do
guess I
with
see all of those as
Yeah.
budgetary,
You do.
but you're right, those aren't.
They are financial in nature, but they're not inside of the operating budget.
So,
per se.
so if you have 15 articles, and Article 2 or Article 3 tends to be the giant, you know, we're gonna pass the budget all at once,
Yeah.
you know? And last year it was mind-boggling how quickly town meeting passed the school part of the budget after the years before that being ours. So are you suggesting that next week we look at the warrants, in that example, 1, 3 through 15, and get our positions on those so that we then, when the budgety part comes, have different dedicated time for that?
That was a suggestion. I'm really looking for the committee's input on
Are any of
how,
those things written up yet, those warrant things, where they could be emailed to us so we could look at them?
yes,
after Thursday.
after Thursday.
Okay.
Well,
So-
what we will need though, at that, we will need answers. We'll have
Yes.
if you recall what in the past, we go over them and we go, well, what's this all about? So we need to ask someone what it's all about, the background.
So I would prefer to go over them maybe on the 3rd, after our meeting with the Board of Selectmen.
The non-budget warrants,
Yes.
okay.
And then maybe on the 9th, we would, I assume are we allowed to vote on for the public hearing?
I think the
On the
departments
on the
have been
articles we can.
requested to attend the public hearing, so if you had certain questions
On the
on the
10th.
budget, on the 10th.
But could we,
Yes.
are we able to vote on
On the
some of
articles.
the articles for the public hearing?
They're not, the articles are not part of the public hearing. The only part of the public hearing is for the budget,
That's
which is
kinda-
our town meeting obligation.
I thought that I'm looking at the glances I'm getting from the town administrator, and
Okay.
finance director,
Okay.
I'm just looking for their input.
Well, if the only obligation we have for town meeting is the budget, what the heck are we doing voting on the other warrants?
So that's.
Personally, I would want the public hearing before I made my recommendation. That's just me, because I would want to hear if that sways your opinion, or has the departments are going to be here that night and you're going to ask questions. you
For
know,
the
they-
budget.
I'm
the
not
budget.
talking, Ryan's talking about the articles, Articles 3
Say
through
11 through
15.
20, the
And
non-budget.
Jean's talking about the head of the.
The budget.
No, Jean's talking about the head of the highway department being here to talk about questions relating to warrant 11 that says we might take a road. What would be the impact of taking the road?
we have requested all the department heads to be here at the public hearing. So if you had any questions on the other articles and you needed to ask them, that would be the time to ask them.
So my preference would be to do, so, I mean, last year, that night, we were here till
I
11:10.
think that's gonna drag that meeting out if we have to go.
So I'm trying to, I expect with the library as an issue, among other things, I'm expecting a big crowd that night, a fair amount of people are gonna wanna speak. So my kind of theory at least is, we're gonna have to let that happen, then we have to vote on the budget that night. We can't vote on the actual fiscal budget till after the public hearing, that would not be fair. But what I would maybe like to do is vote on those non-budgetary items to get that kind of taken out of the way. That's, normally is gonna take us a good,
Makes sense to me, unless there's a procedural reason not to.
well, that's kind of what I'm asking, is there a law or procedural reason not to?
I don't know any.
If we get them in the mail,
I
Can we
just
send
go on
out
record, I'd be
questions?
against that.
if we get them in the mail and look at them and read them and have personally, any one of us, additional questions,
So I
we
would,
can send an email to you. Article 1, need more info.
Does that break open meeting also?
so what I would intend is on the 3rd, after we meet with the selectmen, we would then to try to review them, talk about them, discuss them, see if we have any questions, and then
If
maybe.
we will, we need input, Brian, that's all I'm telling you is we need either Matt, we need Matt to be there and give us the background information on those articles. And if he's gonna be with the Board of Selectmen, he can't do.
Oh, I see what you mean.
That's
Meeting
the
at same
problem,
time.
that's what I'm thinking.
Okay. So-
Otherwise, I agree.
Okay.
But if we get the things ahead of time, we have any questions, why can't we just send them to Matt?
We can.
Because I don't know, if you talking about those open meeting laws, and
Yeah.
I'm kind of worried about that, but I think as long as we go straight to him and don't,
Yeah, no, I'm
Uh,
not
do
talking
things between us.
I'm not sending my questions to you, I'm sending them to the chairman only.
yeah, but I'm gonna see him, right?
No, you're
No, you
not,
don't have to reply all.
no.
She won't even see him, she won't even be on the recipient list.
Well, even know that I asked it.
Everybody see, I don't know what I'm doing.
So my thought is we would not vote on, we would not vote on the 3rd.
You can pass notes.
It'll be on CNN News.
We would discuss them on the 3rd and then vote on the 9th after we talk to the library. And I'd also like to, I should mention to the chief, I'd like to talk to the chief on the 9th about this capital committee recommendations. Will those be done on the 9th?
I think our plan right now is to finish tomorrow. We are halfway through the rating process. We have to go over the school's requests, add them to the rating list, and finish the rating. I think we're gonna accomplish all of that tomorrow.
We gave them an April 3rd date that they had to be completed.
So now Howard, can I hear why you object to, A, why you object, and B, how do we avoid a 4.5-hour meeting
Well,
on the 10th?
Two things. My perception would be that those, if you will, non-budget warrant items tend to, amongst this group, to the extent the group can stay focused, well, I know, Aaron.
What are you hinting at now?
Shot at the chair.
If they might, no. If they might be relatively quick items.
Do you
They
realize
should be
this is
quick
on
items.
camera?
Yes, I do. And thank you for trying it. Squirrel. So try to be able to get through those pretty quickly, but I agree, I digest Jean's point. I think in fairness to the heads of the committees and the groups that are coming in, on the 10th, the open meeting, that I'd like to hear all the component pieces before voting on any of the warrants. And if that requires me to stay an extra hour later that night, so be it. That's-
I'm not looking to, believe me, I'm with you.
No,
And I stay with
I
you.
just, I haven't been through one before, so I just kind of, the open meeting, how's it set up?
Public hearing, is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
I'm sorry, the public hearing, sorry.
So, in the past, the chairperson has read through the Board of Selectmen Town Administrator budget.
So it's a finance committee meeting,
It is a finance
Not a
committee.
joint.
Yeah.
There's
Okay.
usually, last year there was a pretty good crowd till
Sometimes it's standing room only.
we were
Sometimes
discussing
they're
about
open
the library.
What if we had a discussion on the 3rd of a sense of the Senate? you know, a discussion warrant by warrant about where we, all the debate amongst the committee would be that day, and cover the debate, so that we had a sense of where we expected to be, and then after the town meeting, to the extent, then we could have quick votes.
A
Do we
public
match
hearing.
still,
Public
after the public hearing, do we match where we were last Thursday? Did anybody change? Are we good? You know, we had a tentative vote last Thursday of 5-1, 6-0, 8-0. Everybody good. So that we do the debate and the significant part of it on the 3rd,
Okay.
and then after the meeting on the 10th, giving everybody the fairness of their time and their input, so that they feel as though they've had our ear.
And the benefit to that would be, if you had any questions, you could then ask the department
Yeah, if
heads.
things on the 3rd came up,
Right.
and you didn't know the answer,
Right.
you could get it on.
Okay, all right, so since at least some on the committee are uncomfortable, and I'm not entirely comfortable, we will go ahead and officially vote on the 10th. But I would like to discuss them on the 3rd, so when I will adjust, I actually sent in, sent in the agenda, I will edit it for the clerk and put the discussion of the warrant on there, because that was not on there for Tuesday. Do we need to meet on, or, well, I guess we do need to meet, because we're gonna meet the library. Do we wanna have any discussion of the budget, of the two budgets, in the items before the public hearing? We typically have not in the past, we typically have just kind of, but,
Well, what we've seen so far, is that what we can afford, or is not what we can afford? Evidently not, right?
the Kevin Morse draft is what we can afford.
Without an override?
And so's the town
Right.
administrator.
The town administrator plan. And then the override is,
And the other was department heads, okay.
Right.
That's
Which
good.
from time to time.
Is the only reason y'all are meeting on the 9th to discuss the library or
Oh,
for us to present? to you
Capital
guys?
committee as well.
capital committee too.
Yeah, yeah.
We need to have the 9th on the schedule, just in case we don't have a quorum.
And are
Tuesday,
you wanting me to
I-
present a picture of just zero municipal funding where we're trying to do it privately, or a picture of how skeletony we can run the library
With public funding.
with public funding?
I would
Because
prefer
the
the
assumption with the selectmen is library funding is entirely contingent on the override. Everyone on my board of trustees has come to terms with that. We unanimously voted tonight to support the override. And to answer your question as to whether that, you know, what's different this year that hasn't been in the past, that's it. So I mean, I fully expect the library's line item to be zero if the override doesn't pass.
Have you got any ability to give us a line item if the override doesn't pass? It's not 225.
I don't know if there's
I
much
can
room to
give
go,
you
but there probably is.
A
little.
projected budget, but I don't think you can give me the funds.
Yeah, you know, yeah.
I can try, I
think It's
can,
useful to have that number.
okay.
you know, and the reason I wanted to invite you back, just personally, since we had you here, we really didn't talk about the library going away, what that would mean to the community, your vision for the library for the next 10 to 15 years if funded, that sort of stuff, which I think is important for the community to hear. So that's what I would like to see.
Okay.
Okay?
And we talk about just a little more process.
Sure, I'd love to talk a little more process.
All right, so real quick, this concept of town meeting night and what finance committee offers that night. What the two I've been to in the past ran marginally differently, and what we're talking about tonight seems to maybe be even slightly different again. So it seemed to me we had a year where there were line items, there were warrant items, where there was then a notation in the card, Finance Committee is in favor of this 5-2, or is against this 6-0 kind of thing. And I thought that was useful to people, and we were asked questions from time to time. Excuse me, my question, why finance go against this or something? So that's easier when it's just a all standing alone warrant, pumper truck, in favor or against. I suppose override is a warrant, no-
It's an article,
right?
an article,
Yeah, an article.
yeah.
All right, so, but it seems to me, and nobody would want to politic here, but it seems to me there could be one or more line items in the budget that we would have positions on. I mean, that seems to be what we're doing. Whether we're talking about proposing a whole new budget, that it would seem to me to just be, hey, vote for their budget or vote for our budget, versus their budget, and we've got the following 7 line item concerns. Of their budget, 267 line items. We've got the following 7 where we did not recommend them, or we recommended something different. That would seem to me to be the best way to approach the process, but I don't know how you can approach that via process.
Yeah, I don't know either, because
I don't know if,
it's
yeah,
not your
maybe.
warrant.
What's
Well,
that?
it is their recommendation.
So
It's their
So
recommendation,
whatever
it's
we-
not their
yeah.
warrant.
No.
I'm choosing my words carefully, Jane. The vehicle belongs to the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah,
So what I'm trying to understand, and I'm going to my past, the budget committee wrote the budget,
yeah,
not the town council.
yeah,
If they wanted their budget, they had to put in a separate,
yeah,
whole separate thing. Massachusetts is structured differently. It's
Yeah.
the selectmen's warrant.
Right.
Is your capacity only to advise, or
In the past, we have put up the finance committee recommend,
Correct.
barring that
No, I've
issue with
seen that,
DVT.
but
hold on,
I'm talking
finish
about
that,
something
hold
much
on.
more detailed.
Finish that.
So last year,
Finance committee recommendation of what?
here is the budget that the finance committee recommends.
So-
So last year, right, there were only a couple differences. We added some street lighting funds, we took it away from the reserve fund. There was one other minor change, which.
So we had a finance committee budget as an alternative?
No,
So what
as,
you-
no, we're the main budget.
Recommendations to the budget.
What you would do is you would have the department head request, if you want the town people to see it, you would have the Board of Selectmen budget, and then you would have the FinCom recommendation. It is their warrant, but it is the FinCom flyer. And it's the finance committee that would put the commentary piece underneath the warrant article.
but the vehicle is a motion from the floor, isn't it?
Yeah.
The finance
The
committee,
the
No,
board of
that's not a
selectmen make, the board of select person gets up and said, I hereby move
no,
to
the
approve warrant
finance
number
committee,
3.
I did that last year.
The finance
No, that's
committee.
finance
recommends
committee's
the
job.
budget.
it's the finance committee's job.
Finance
I-
That
committee's
piece
job.
is missing in my mind.
Yeah, I
So we
personally
would
did
have
last year.
two separate, if you did not agree with the Board of Selectmen, on the main warrant budget article, there would be 2 columns. And hopefully, most of them would be the same, but then you'd have those outliers that would be different.
And do people vote en masse, one budget versus the other?
No, they
No.
would,
They would vote on our budget and then,
Yeah.
but they're
and-
welcome
and
to make
they would
amendments to
have
our
to make an
budget.
amendment
At town meeting?
at town
That
meeting.
town meeting on the floor, they have to bring it up in writing.
They do.
They put a hold
That doesn't
on
make sense to me.
certain items, you know, like
Because
Hold
it's not
on.
their warrant.
public
No, but
safety.
There has to be an underlying vehicle that somebody owns, and then somebody makes a motion to change the underlying
And
vehicle.
it's the FinCom recommendation.
FinCom's recommendation is it.
Is what? The
That's
underli-
what
The
this-
underlying vehicle?
I, as
Yes.
finance committee chairman, is recommending the
Mhm.
following budget to
Correct.
the town meeting floor.
Right, period. It's the finance committee's budget
And then I read
that gets
through
recommended.
it.
So basically, you're submitting what would almost be an amendment, a sub-A, a
If we do,
substitute
if,
to the selectmen's budget.
Well, we're hoping they're the same.
yeah,
I mean,
it's
that's-
only
Can we
been
finish the
different.
conversation? I'm asking, what is that motion that you're making?
My interpretation, with no government legal background, was that it was the finance committee's budget, was not the amendment, was the main budget recommended to the floor. Now,
It just doesn't jive.
many
with everything
years,
I
that has-
Stared at all day today, it's their warrant.
And except for the last 2, the first 4, they were exactly the
Yeah.
same. The last 2, there were differences.
Chapter.
Well, we'll just have to clarify that.
We
It's
do try to
section-
make sure the columns are the same. This year will be very different because of the school piece as well.
Yeah,
I mean, you're reducing the school budget, one of the proposals, by 200,000. The school committee chair could stand up and say, I make a motion to amend the school
well, that's
budget.
clear to me, because that's somebody else making a motion from the floor. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about who owns the number that is the controlling number, the number
Finance
you're voting
committee.
yes or no on.
Ryan makes the motion.
Historically, it's been the finance
I
committee,
wanna
the law
say,
is like.
I can't remember
But how-
exactly, it's in the general laws, Commonwealth general laws, section 19,
Mike,
I can't remember exactly where it is.
That the FinCom puts it forth, yeah.
Yeah.
All the years that I've been
The
on, it
article,
was always the
Um,
chairperson of the FinCom that
Yeah.
presented the budget, and we presented the FinCom's
Oh,
budget, if there was any discrepancies between us.
Some
and the
finance
board.
committees make all the
Wait a minute.
motions for all
What do
the
you mean
articles.
if there are any discrepancies? How would anyone know if there were any discrepancies?
Well, if we had any differences in recommendation than what the selectmen,
Because you would have
But
to
isn't
You
it-
show
in-house.
them.
You
Isn't
wouldn't
it-
see, in your example, you wouldn't see the selectmen's
You
recommendation.
do.
Yes, you do.
still
we would
will
show, we would
Where?
show, we
In
would
the-
show two columns.
in the warrant article. You
The
list
columns.
the two columns, so they will see the difference between the two
Right.
columns.
It would say selectmen's budget, FinCom budget.
So, I'm sorry, just to clarify, they would see both columns on, they would definitely see both columns on the
Yep.
flyer. Would they see
Correct.
both columns on the big screen at town meeting?
Yes,
They have in the past?
absolutely.
Okay.
But then how do they vote?
See, the
They're-
problem
they're
is
voting-
parliamentary
Finance committee,
procedure
yay or nay?
doesn't jive.
They're voting
There
yea or
needs
nay
to
on the
be a
FinCom
vehicle, so
budget.
any vote
So if
that
they
fails,
vote nay on the
there's the
FinCom budget,
default.
does it
And
default to
that
the
is
Board
the
of
finance
Selectmen's
committee.
budget?
Yeah,
No.
that's how we
What-
run here. It's the finance committee.
I'd love to see the black letter
Is there a
law. It
tape?
doesn't make sense.
Is
What
there
they-
a tape of these meetings?
What they
Oh,
do,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
they're all
this-
up on the town website.
They are?
Yeah, you can go back and see.
what they do is they generally, if they
Right,
have a
but just tell you what
disagreement with
happened.
one of
We
these
spent all day
items.
researching
I'm just gonna
who's
go-
Okay, that'd be
elected
good.
How to get access to the warrant. This committee doesn't have access to the warrant under the general law.
What?
Somebody needs to explain it to me. Under the general law that creates all of this mechanism, you know, the first Friday of March, that's the last day that petitioners and town officials and committees can
Articles.
bring articles to the selectmen. After that, it's only the selectmen who can craft the warrant.
Yep.
Up until the last minute, or unless something is compelled by law, those are the two ways you get access to the warrant. So how does FinCom get access to the warrant? It's not your warrant.
I was under the impression, like Matt, that it's dependent upon how much power the town gives to the finance committee.
Finance committee has the ability to make their own financial recommendations to the town.
Yeah, but nobody's disputing that.
I agree.
But
as well.
when you
Yeah.
make it, what is it that you're making? Are you making a motion to amend an underlying budget?
That's what I thought.
A comment from the audience, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to entertain.
Section what?
I have last year's.
Well, that's a
Article
little
one
bit
is
of
the
time.
finance
so-
committee's report, article two is the fiscal year budget, which was the select.
The select,
I believe it was a combined
I don't think so.
header.
So, you're right.
It matters because you need to know what you're gonna do. If you have a difference of opinion with the
Thank
board, how are you gonna? Because a recommendation is
How do you
just that,
rectify
it's
it?
only a recommendation. If
We have no
nobody
power,
makes-
we're not elected.
If nobody makes a motion, then the default budget is the selectmen's budget. What you're doing is you're making a motion. You're moving the budget, which if you have no, it's probably been moot in the past, you didn't have enough disagreements.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Last year, we had a disagreement and our budget
Yeah, we did.
passed.
So, but you passed an amendment, so the budget as amended was what was
I
approved by
don't
town
believe
meeting.
amendment was in any, I moved that the town of
No,
Douglas.
we presented the finance,
Same.
whether,
But what if that failed?
Well, it's amended on the floor. If I could finish. We go through all of the line items. And you end up with large categories like general government. And what the moderator does is he says, here's, I'm gonna give you some of the lines. If you wanna hold anything or dispute anything within there, say hold. And this is a town meeting. And then you go back and you look at the numbers, and the person who says hold says, well, I think that it should be less than X or more than X. And I move that, we change it. And it's done right on town meeting floor.
Yep, we vote.
And we vote, whether
He
that's
agrees with all of
changed.
that.
It changes the
Yeah.
general government, it
You're
changes
telling me
the
anything I
bottom
didn't expect you
line.
to say,
Yeah.
those are motions from the floor on an underlying document.
but his question is.
The underlying
if the
document
board-
is the
no.
finance committee's.
If the Board of Selectmen's budget is different from the Finance
Yeah.
Committee,
Oh, well,
the Finance Committee is presented
yes.
that's how we've done it here. The
So
finance
which
committee
Nobody says it's whole.
Okay, it's getting late. Nobody really knows. We know what we've done in the
Yeah,
past.
yeah.
Why don't you say this, Rich, what is thought?
Yeah, we're talking anyway.
There is,
Other stuff we've already.
finance
noted.
committee, there's a association of town finance committees, you might be able to, it's through MMA. So I
Well,
would,
Rich is a moderator in his
Yeah,
town, so
yeah.
I'm gonna
I'm
ask
sorry?
him.
No.
Rich, he's a moderator in Situate,
Oh, Rich Bone,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
okay, yes.
so.
You know, one of the things I noticed with this moderator, though, he doesn't go through the budget the same way at the town meeting as Jerome used to.
No.
He
Yeah,
just puts everything together and let's go through it in a hurry.
He's looking for ways to shorten it
Yeah.
and still have
I
it
think
be
you're gonna
efficient.
have to be open to a whole different experience.
That's fine. That's fine too. Just
Welcome to Massachusetts, Matt.
Can I ask one simple question before we adjourn? On the last overrides, did we do a 70-30 split on those override amounts?
The last override was the school, the school salaries and expense, 1.5 million, and a combined, there was, if my understanding your question correctly, it was only 2 lines in the supplemental article. It was not a 70-30.
It was 100-0.
It was, no, it was 1.5 and 200,000.
Okay.
There was
the
no
answer
other
is
departments
no,
listed.
it wasn't like 7-30 split would be the answer.
So what would this override do? Is this override gonna be, how is this one gonna be split?
That's what's gonna be decided
So we're gonna
Thursday.
talk on
Okay, so I
Tuesday.
really want to talk about the override and how, because I still don't know where it's being proposed to go, so.
That's
Yeah, that's what
Thursday's
people are gonna
discussion.
wanna know, where is it going?
Okay,
At the
so,
moment,
yeah,
your answer is on what I
Okay.
gave you tonight.
Good,
so if
thank
you
you.
do the math, it says 500 for free cash, 220K for the library, these are all approximates, I know Gene hates it, but 320K for the school, and then $360,000 surplus gets you to 1.4 million, the rest is in there. But if you look on this sheet, right here, right? This one? Yeah. No, one from Matt, the 4th page, says FY 2019 budget comparisons and analysis.
Well, the 500 is not going to free
So
cash,
this one.
it's not
It's
using
not being
500,000.
used for free
Well, I
cash,
just wanna make sure for our listening audience.
So if you look at either Mr. Morris's draft or the town administrator 5-year plan, compare it to the override, that's where you'll see the difference. You do the math yourself. But we will talk about that further. So I will,
You ready to any motions?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
agendas to approve,
Oh, minutes,
yeah. Minutes, and do we have any vouchers?
Just take Robert's rules and throw them out.
Only tell you past.
Even though they're specified.
Past practice is what I'm bringing to your attention.
So I did pass out most,
Is when?
Next Tuesday.
look at the packet with the committee meeting agenda. The meeting minutes from the back, we should take those. So everyone's clear, we have 3 meetings left. Tuesday the 3rd with the selectmen, Monday the 9th, and Tuesday the 10th, which is the public hearing. I also will send out an agenda for the 11th in case things go awry on the 10th and we need to.
I'll move that we accept the meeting minutes of February 13th, 2018 as written.
Is there a second?
Seconded by
No.
Eric.
Thank you. All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting minutes approved, motion made by Pam, seconded by Eric. Okay,
I move we adjourn.
Second.
It's been seconded.
I don't think so.
Motion on the floor, Mr. Chairman. I'll withdraw it if you want to.
no, I just don't still have a clear understanding how we're proceeding the next 3 days.
Well,
I think it's best to go by the Cedar Brook minutes.
Trying to avoid that. Okay, we got a motion made
So our
by,
next meeting is,
I would suggest that if we can, take some time to look at that last town meeting last May on tape, get an idea of how it went last time, so we're all at least
Well, I think we'll have an answer
We're
for
gonna have
you.
an answer for Rich,
Yeah,
so.
and we'll try to get the warrant articles to you so you can review them for the April 3rd meeting.
Yeah, I mean, we technically don't even know how we've been doing it in the past. I assume it is, but that's all we know, so. Okay, so Pam made a motion to adjourn, who second?
Eric,
Eric?
right on it.
So, Gene, 76 smoke.
All those in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everybody.